Nothing was coming out about these files until 3 million pages of horrific atrocities were released to us all at once. This is the perfect recipe for mass vicarious trauma. Our amygdalas, the fear center in our brains, are hyper-activated, causing outrage, disgust, and hypervigilance. Imagine how much better of a place the world would be if instead of like psychopathic evil people having billions of dollars, spiritually embodied, loving people who want to help humanity had billions of dollars. I think neuroscience is really entering a golden age right now, especially connecting it back to human consciousness and how that intertwines with our brain, really. My opinion is that our consciousness is non-physical and that each of us has this incredibly complex technological marvel of the entire universe that is our brains.
Brandon Cowling, thank you for joining me, man.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you here. I'm going to go ahead and play one of your reels for those who are not familiar with you. I came across you on Instagram.
Awesome.
And you've made some pretty awesome content regarding neuroscience and the biofield, and you like to meditate underneath trees so that your biofield can sync with the tree.
I do.
And you're studying neuroscience in college, so it's pretty cool. So we'll go ahead and play that, and then we'll continue on from there.
Everybody is talking about the Epstein files, but nobody is talking about the neuroscientific effect on the population and why this is being done. For months, nothing was coming out about these files until 3 million pages of horrific atrocities were released to us all at once. This is the perfect recipe for mass vicarious trauma. Our amygdalas, the fear center in our brains, are hyper-activated, causing outrage, disgust, and hypervigilance. And at the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking rational part of your brain, is down-regulated. And this is happening across millions of people at the exact same time. And so, as a result, social media is flooded with content about this. I guarantee you, it's all you're seeing on your For You page. And this leads to desensitization and mass compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is empathetic burnout. It is well studied in the medical field and in first responders. And it is when your amygdala physically cannot fire anymore. And so the outrage, the disgust, it's replaced by a numb helplessness. And so these files have been systematically released in such a way as to mimic trauma neuroscience, leaving the entire population feeling helpless and numb. So listen, I have known about this information for years before this was released. I know how these people think. I know what they are trying to do. They want your outrage. They want you to feel helpless. They want you to feel numb. They are trying to rob you of your human empathy. And so the way to beat them is to set your heart ablaze. Kindle the fire within, not to burn down the world, but to bring light into the darkness. Control your outrage, control your attention, and focus it on what you can actually do in your life to bring light into this world. This is going to reactivate your prefrontal cortex and recruit your reticular activating system to harness the full power of your brain to actually find solutions to make the world a better place rather than just being depressed about how dark and terrible it is. And so yeah, I'm angry because they can't keep getting away with this, but the way to stop evil is with love. And so I'm going to love even harder. I'm going to work even harder every single day to make the world a better place where light can shine, where people don't have to be afraid, where terrible things like this don't happen. And I hope that each and every single one of you is there to help me.
Dude, could not agree more. I know that's a heavy topic.
I actually haven't listened to that reel in like a long time, so I kind of forgot like what I said, but
yeah, when I first said I was bringing it up, you kind of looked at me like...
Past version of me was kind of spitting fire, not gonna lie.
You were. It's funny when I said I'm gonna play that one, you looked at me like, whoa, you like kind of forgot what you said.
I did.
But I couldn't agree more. Have you studied any of the phenomena related to mass psychogenic illness or mass social contagion?
No, I haven't studied that, but I know the term and like just the concept that like a thought or like an idea can like give people like real physical symptoms, like completely unrelated to any physical phenomenon, really.
Right. And I would even take it potentially a step above that when you get into the understanding that we're made of water. Water permeates all facets of this reality. And there's a lot of data and information, and for lack of a better term, because these aren't like necessarily peer-reviewed studies, not that I really care about that too much, and we'll get into some of that during this, but a lot of stuff that has been done that is repeatable and observable, suggesting that human consciousness can impact the physical expression and orientation of water. And given that water permeates all facets of this reality, it might be that human beings en masse, when collectively focusing on one thing, actually could create the potential for more of that thing to occur. And then even without getting into that very esoteric line of thought, just below that, what you talk about with like mass helplessness and numbness, I see so much of that right now after this whole Epstein file situation. I was just talking with a friend of mine the other day that after the Epstein files release, a lot of people who tend to think along more mainstream lines seem to just like jump right back into their normal day-to-day and are even like more numb and apathetic about reality. That's my experience, and that's a very general statement.
Yeah, because it's like even without getting into all this other stuff, which esoteric stuff, which like, you know, yes, but even without getting into all of that, like the daily person, when you're exposed to something like that, like how could this be real? You're just like, what do I do? And the answer is like, I don't know. And so you kind of just forget about it and kind of like show yourself off to it and like don't really think about it. And so I think like even without getting to anything crazy, it's really just like a psychological question, like how is this causing people to act and take less action and like less care and like love in their heart to do good in the world, you know? And so the way to fight that is just to really just take action. You know, it's as simple as that, like positive action in your life, no matter what that looks like. It doesn't have to be anything radical, you know, or crazy. It's just like appreciating your family, like, you know, putting more effort into your day-to-day, not like wasting your time, like developing yourself as a person. It's like the simplest, like most grounded things, you know, are really like the answer to the world's, you know, craziest, most mind-blowing like evils.
Amen. 100% agree with that. I think an added layer for people who are who tend to be more alternative thinkers, let's say, or were aware of the situations with the Epstein files and stuff like this prior to their release, like you and I and many of the people who listen to this podcast, is that by the Epstein files being released in the way that they did, with there being no justice after the fact, is kind of them saying without saying, look what we're doing, look how much power we have, look at the evils we're doing, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what they're trying to get us to think. And then again, the solutions go back to exactly what you said, though. It's like, yeah, we actually can do something about this. We can dissolve any of the conditioned beliefs that they are quote unquote authorities. That's one whole separate thing that we don't need to get into for the sake of this episode. But then we can also reclaim our own beliefs, thoughts, feelings, words, and actions on a day-to-day basis and create more love in this world.
Yeah, I think like a lot of like where people's minds instantly go to is I can't do anything because there's not going to be a revolution tomorrow to overthrow the government. I think that's where people's mind goes like instantly. It's like, well, like what if you just made some money? Like this is like I think this is an unpopular concept in lots of like spiritual alternative communities, is like there's kind of like a block against money. But like imagine how much better of a place the world would be is if instead of like psychopathic evil people having billions of dollars, like spiritually embodied, like loving people who want to help humanity had billions of dollars. Like what if we started there?
Amen. I'm glad you're so young and you're already past that conditioning phase, because I had to.
Money's good. You can do so much, like so many good things with money, like easily.
Mm-hmm. How old are you?
I'm 20 years old.
20 years old, man. Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing that he's already gotten through that condition. Everyone always applauds me for how young I am getting, and I'm like, no, there's some incredible people between Liev Dalton, Jacob Diaz. I don't know if you've connected with them. You totally should. Yourself, Ishan Mishra, and there's so many other awesome people who are young who are doing such awesome work. Jonathan Jarecki being another one. I don't know if you've connected with him.
Yes.
Awesome dude. Matt Maruka from Raw Optics. The list goes on. There's some young people doing incredible work who really, really are getting it. So what has been your journey to, like, why did you want to study neuroscience to begin with?
Yeah. So ever since I was young, I've always loved like science. I just loved like science and was always interested in that, like just kind of for no reason. I was always just kind of drawn towards that. But around high school, like sophomore, junior year, I got really interested in like nutrition because I had a friend like say like, hey, like red meat's actually healthy for you. I was like, what are you talking about? There's no way that's true. And so I started like just researching all nutrition, like, oh, wow, it actually is nutritious. Like, oh, like the way you eat can have such an impact on the way you feel and think, like who knew? And so I was like, what else? You know, what else in my life has like not been true? Like, that's what it was with nutrition, where it's like, what I thought was like the right way to eat is actually not the right way to eat. Like it was completely opposite. It's like, what else in my life has been like that? And so I started getting into nutrition and fitness and like medicine and like being like, you know, just the best version of myself. And that's when I got into more of like the spiritual stuff and like all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so college, like I had always wanted to like study medicine just because like I'm passionate about science and like human health. And I have a feeling that like we're in such a transition where like we're trying to go from like a sick population to a health population. And I think neuroscience is really like entering a golden age right now, especially connecting it back to human consciousness and how that intertwines like with our brain, really, you know, getting into like the hard question of neuroscience, like how does a non-physical consciousness express through a physical brain? And so it's just sounded so interesting to me. There's nothing else I'd rather be looking into than like what in our brains I don't think that our brains create our consciousness, but allow us to express consciousness to such a high degree, and how can we optimize that to really be the best, most authentic, highest version of ourselves? I think neuroscience is like the key to that.
Okay, I like that answer. Going back to you discovering that red meat wasn't bad for you, was that belief that red meat is bad that pervasive amongst people in your generation, like specifically where you grew up? What I'm getting at there is I sort of have been in a bubble, relatively speaking, for the past 10 years, and I see what looks like a lot of commonly held mainstream beliefs, but I've surrounded myself with so many like-minded people who are already to varying degrees on the same page as me. So it's hard for me to really know how ubiquitous and how common that belief is out there. So what was that like, learning that red meat wasn't bad? Was it that a lot of your peers at the time in your high school had come to adopt the perspective that red meat is a bad thing?
It was just that like I was in a phase or like around people where it's like what you ate wasn't really even kind of like a consideration. You shouldn't really even think about it. You know, I was just on the tennis team. We'd eat Cane's or Chick-fil-A or whatever, right? You just ate food.
Okay, that sounds like me in high school then too.
Didn't really think about like, oh, like what is the macros on this? Like what micronutrients am I getting? And so when I like did learn about all that, it was kind of like, it was a little bit before it was more known by everybody, or at least like the everyone was aware of the idea at that, like at this point. I feel like that there's people who think that red meat is healthy for you, whether or not everybody agrees with that. It was like a little bit before that was like all around. So that's when I started watching like Paul Saladino and that kind of guy talking about like, oh, there's actually these health benefits. I was like, oh, he's actually right.
Right. You know, this brings up an interesting point with you saying that you grew up just loving science, and up until the past few years, there seemed to have been a lot of published quote unquote science demonizing red meat and demonizing some of these other things that cultures and civilizations across the world throughout history ate, and the ways that they lived that led to them living long, healthy lives. But again, like I said, this science, in air quotes, coming out seeming to suggest the opposite of that. So what have you discovered pertaining to that? And when you say you love science, how much do you think what we've come to accept, generally speaking, as a society, as common, quote unquote, scientific truths? I know science is not something that finds truths necessarily, but they sure seem to communicate it as if it is an objective, irrefutable scientific fact. When you press them on it, oftentimes they'll say, well, we're not actually able to discern something that is a scientific fact. It just gives us a suggestion of what might be. But again, it's all about how it's communicated.
Nobody ever acts like that.
Nobody ever acts like that, ever, man.
No,
Ever.
No.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the red meat in particular and like the saturated fat was like something that really like red pilled me, like opened my eyes, because when you look at like the evidence upon which scientific establishments are claiming that it is bad for you and giving you heart disease and like the LDL cholesterol is like gonna kill you, it's like there's nothing there. Like in particular, like the Ancel Keys 7 nations study. When you learn about that, it's unreal, where they actually studied 22 different countries looking at like the levels of saturated fat that they were consuming. And then out of those 22 countries, there was zero association with however much saturated fat they were eating and the rates of heart disease. But they, like by definition, cherry picked the 7 countries that actually had a positive association with eating more saturated fat and heart disease, and used that to say that saturated fat was causing heart disease. And then you figure out like Ancel Keys was literally paid can't remember the exact amount. I think it was around $12,000 back in the 70s by sugar companies to publish that study. And so it was just like, this is blatant. Like, this is blatant corruption, like just legitimate, like medical fraud. Like, can this happen? And it's like, what else in society has like, it blew my mind, you know, because science, it's supposed to be, and it's presented as this thing that like you can really trust and like put your faith into. And so I was like, how is this possible? You know, who let this happen?
Right. Yeah, it's wild. It's really wild to think about too. And then you wonder, with those 7 countries that they cherry picked, what were the other confounding variables? What was their lifestyle like? What was their diet like? Did these studies properly control for all of those things? Did they adjust for all those things? I haven't looked at that study myself, but those are always the questions that people need to ask. And I wonder if you share this perspective, or if you've really thought about this. I've come to understand that the most important part of any scientific study, of anything that's published, is the methods section, and very few people read the methods section, which outlines how they actually came to the determination that they're making in the title, the abstract, the conclusion, things like this.
Yeah, that's true. It is like, it's rare for someone to read a whole study, you know, really. And studies are hard to understand, you know.
Do you think it's intentional? Or do you think it's just that they're using advanced language because that's the proper terminology for each of those things?
Science isn't easy. You know, there is a real scientific method, and like there are real statistical, like, you know, methods that are used that are appropriate and really do like make sense. But, you know, in some cases, perhaps like it is potentially like made inaccessible to public. I don't know about that. I think science is just hard. And like these scientific methods like do exist for a reason. They are used like in incredible ways and like so many amazing studies. Like, I am so pro science. Like, I am not against the scientific establishment at all. I think it's incredible. I just think that not every single person doing science across all of history has been trustworthy, and there has been fraud, and there has been like bad practices and like financial motive, like wanting to get certain results for the purpose of making more money. And that's something that everybody needs to be aware of. I think that like people like choose teams, you're either like pro science or like against science, or you trust the scientific establishment, or like it's evil and it's like they're all trying to kill you, and you know, it's all conspiracy, right? But like reality is always more nuanced than that. There's always more to it. And so unfortunately, you know, the answer is it's just hard. It's complex. And like with each and every scientific study and like conclusion that has come to, you have to do your due diligence and look into it yourself, you know, and like go case by case. There's no pattern that you can always follow to reach the right answer, because reality is just more nuanced and more complex than that.
I appreciate that, especially at the end, that it would behoove of you to go double check yourself and actually read some of this stuff. And I brought up the language that is used in scientific papers because, whether intentional or not, it almost seems to be occulted in some weird way. And what I mean by occulted is literally just hidden in plain sight, in that the language can sometimes be so complex to decipher that the average person will look at a scientific paper and be like, this jargon is too complex for me to sift through. These equations are too complex for me to sift through. I'm just going to leave it up to the experts and hope that they got it right. That's what most people do. And the problem in doing that is experts can be bought out. Experts are fallible in and of themselves, even outside of being bought out by a pharmaceutical company, by an agricultural company. They're not infallible.
Yeah.
And the studies that they design are likewise also not infallible, even if they have the best intentions in mind. Mm-hmm. And this, I don't know, this is a big question for me, especially as someone who is in school right now studying neuroscience, and you're pre-med too. I think that's okay if I say that, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're pre-med right now. I definitely want to get into some of that. What is science in your mind? I know I'm dropping that one on you, but what is science? Because that can be a big catch-all term and it means something different to some people than it does to other people.
Yeah, I think that science is really just the process of like discovering what is true. Like, how does reality work? And so earlier we were discussing how people have in their mind like segmented, like here's science, here's spirituality. That's really not true. Like, science is actually like supposed to be all encompassing. People just kind of usually associate that with like a materially reductionist paradigm, because in the 21st century, that's been what has been presented as science, which isn't necessarily bad just because like that is what's empirically observable and testable under most circumstances. But I don't think that all of reality like fits under the paradigm of like what is materially reductionistically observable, like pure matter, right? And science, like true science, like encompasses all of that. Like all phenomenon that exist, you know, can go into the category of science. And like you were saying earlier, part of the reason like I started creating my Instagram reels was because of how science is like largely inaccessible to the general population. So I wanted to take these like practices and these studies that like these ways that I knew that people could improve their lives and break them down into like easy to understand, you know, just short videos. And because I think people should be able to trust the experts. Like I never blame someone in the population for like trusting their doctor or trusting that they can go to the grocery store and buy the food and like it's not going to kill you. You should be able to do that. You should be able to walk into the grocery store and buy the food and trust that it's like good for you. It's not going to literally kill you, and trust that it's not going to make you have to go to a doctor who you should be able to listen to. The doctor, you should be able to do everything the doctor says and just get healthy and well. But unfortunately, like that's just not the case in our current society. But I would never blame like the individual for that, because you should be able to do that.
Most doctors, like most scientists, are well-intentioned people. And I think
very much so.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've said that a number of times on this podcast. I don't buy into whether this is overtly stated or just a commonly held sort of background sentiment, especially after the COVID era, that all doctors are evil and in on this scam to harm people. I don't think that that's it at all. I just think that the educational system has been co-opted and manipulated, and a lot of true information has been obfuscated or sort of left out of the context, left out of the education system. In addition to that, there are funding interests for people who have really their sights set on making the most money that they possibly can for whatever multinational corporation that they're the CEO of. There are so many factors here that have led experts, in air quotes, to sort of adopt things that may have been articulated as if it's empirically validated, when you go look, it's not actually empirically validated.
Yes, I think that's true. And like 100%, like I think 99.9% of doctors are really smart people who have the best of intentions for people. And I think lots of time people don't understand like how medical treatment works, and that like something needs to be like proven to be effective, or like needs to at least be like empirically studied or peer reviewed, whether or not like you agree with the studies or not. Like it needs to be like empirically verified before a doctor can just like start telling their patients to do it. You know, I think sometimes people just get the conception that doctors could kind of do whatever they want, but they're just like following these guidelines. Like, no, there are like strict medical guidelines and statutes and like, you know, research protocols that must be followed like for the safety of the patient, to make sure that like, you know, some doctor can't just tell a patient to do whatever and then they go do it and die, really.
As the mainstream system continues to tighten its grips on average men and women, with inflation running rampant and cost of living skyrocketing, it's becoming increasingly challenging for most people to make ends meet and to really maintain and expand financial abundance. And that's where I think it's incredibly important that we adopt and really start looking into alternative financial strategies, alternative ways to structure, and then some of these technologies that exist that help us expand and grow outside of these very extractive, exploitative mainstream systems. So I'm sitting here with my dear friend, Otto Gomes from Crypto Freedom Academy, who would like to share a little bit about Crypto Freedom Academy and all of its offerings and what he teaches inside the academy.
Yeah, the academy, the main reason I created it is to create community. And I think that's the most important thing right now. You know, the currency of the future is relationships. And the technologies that we have are only as good as those relationships. And so in the academy, I try to instill in everyone a sense of empowerment to know their current relationship to the energy of exchange so that we can attract more of the medium. I help you guys utilize the technologies that are available to us, like blockchain, trust and contract law, and how to do that privately.
So if you're interested in learning more about Crypto Freedom Academy and all the things that Otto offers, and his depth and wealth of knowledge on the topic of crypto and financial structuring and passive income, check out episode 241 of the Way Forward podcast with Otto, or just head to thewayforward.com, and that's thewayfwrd.com. crypto freedom, or just head to the show notes and you'll find the link there. Here's a problem with that though, because I hear you and I think that sounds good in theory, but when we talk about things being co-opted, I'll just give you one of several examples that I could give. So the aluminum adjuvants that are in vaccines, aluminum phosphate and aluminum hydroxide, right? Do you know how those were studied and validated to be safe for the amount that is administered to newborn babies and infants up to 12 months, or for teenagers and adults for that matter?
I have no idea.
See, this is the issue, is it is stated that these are empirically validated to be safe. But there's 2 studies, and I'm going off the top of my memory on this one for those who are listening and watching. I know I've covered this on other episodes where I go deep into the actual studies that have been done claiming that to suggest that these are safe when injected into infants and teens, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, there was a study done in, I believe, 2011 where they took 4 adult rabbits and injected them with injected one subset with aluminum phosphate, and then the other subset, so 2 of them with aluminum phosphate, 2 of them with aluminum hydroxide. And it was just a biodistribution study to see how much was excreted out of the rabbits at day 7, I think, day 14, day 21, day 28, or something like this. And they determined that a certain amount had been excreted out, but not all of it had been excreted out, right? It wasn't even intended to measure the health effects on these rabbits. They then took that study and then another study where it was a modeled study based on that rabbit data and aluminum ingestion, so not injection, in adults, and adult males specifically, if I remember correctly. And these 2 studies are called the Mitkus study and the Flarin study. Those are the primary authors on the papers. So these are the 2 primary studies that the CDC, the FDA, and vaccine manufacturers cite in order to make the claim that these substances are safe when injected into babies and to human beings, period, and to pets as well. And like I said, the first study is just a biodistribution study, wasn't even measuring health effects. And then the second study, and it was only done on 4 rabbits, by the way. So that's already incredibly problematic. And then the second study took ingested aluminum and took the data from the rabbit study and then used a model to extrapolate what might occur when this substance is injected into human beings in order to make the claim that just this substance alone, there's already a variety of other issues with vaccines, is safe when injected. And you can validate that yourself. It's wild. But the point that I'm getting at is, it sounds great in theory that yes, we have to follow these safety protocols and things like this, but in actuality, when one just goes and looks at the studies that they claim demonstrate empirically that these substances are safe or that this is an effective treatment, et cetera, you find when you read the method section, going back to that being the most important part of the paper, that the claims that they're making in the abstract, in the conclusion that is then cited by another paper and cited by another paper and cited by another paper, cannot possibly be true based on the methods that they followed in their own papers. You see what I'm saying with that?
I do.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that doesn't sound like good science based on how you just explained it to me. And I hope that, in the future, we can really base like our medical systems and just our systems as a whole, like within our society, like on what true science is, like really like empirically testing things, like peer reviewing them, like gold standard data is actually is gold standard. It's really good. And I think that like, just like the truth is good, as long when we really apply the scientific method to find what is genuinely true without any presuppositions or like monetary like incentives, what is actually true will actually be what is of the best benefit to society. And I think like, most people realize that. It's just that there's, people at the top who don't want like what is true to come out because they're making a lot of money off of a product that they have. I think it's as simple as that. I don't like the fact that there may be like, big conspiracies going on is a maybe, but I think it's really like much simpler than that. Most of the time is that people just want to make money, and totally. They'll do bad things to do that.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that for the most part. Again, like we can speculate all day about this supposed secret societies that exist and things like this. I mean, I think there's strong evidence to suggest that they do exist, but whether they have their hands in as many things as most people tend to think that they have their hands in the sort of truther, health, and freedom space, that's purely speculation. I think in most cases, it does go back to financial incentives. And I mean, I've used this example too, and I know Dr. Cowling, who is one of my mentors, has used this example as well. Like, well, how could virologists be misled to this degree? And we're not going to get into virology for the sake of this. I want to talk neuroscience and all those things, but I just want to use this example real quick, that how could virologists be misled to this degree? And it's like, first off, trying to get grant money to do studies and research that go against the foundations of the field that you're studying, good luck, that will not happen. That's the first piece. B, the second thing is you just spent countless hours, countless years studying hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt and things like this for most people. And you're now being presented with evidence to suggest that the foundations of your paradigm are incorrect. The cognitive dissonance that arises from that and the reconciling of, well, what am I going to do if I'm not studying this? You're now presenting me with some information that might suggest that the foundations of this field that I'm in, that I have hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in, might not be correct. For most people, understandably, because of human nature, they're not going to go look into the foundations of that. They're just not going to do it. And it's not that they're bad people. It's just that the way these various systems are currently designed is that in many ways, it goes back to the financial system. It really traps people in a lot of debt to where they don't know what they could do otherwise. But just setting that aside, I think that with people like you and some of the other brilliant thinkers that are out there, we're really beginning to see a paradigm shift where people are hungry for some true information with respect to health and the nature of reality and consciousness and how all of this works. And I think the more we have voices like you out there who are doing a good job of showing another angle, another way to look at things, that there might be some non-material, non-physical aspects to this reality that the scientific community overwhelmingly up to this point has not fully considered, right? And I guess the first question related to that would be that what have you learned in your university education in neuroscience? And I guess the first sub-question would be, where have you learned in your formal education that consciousness comes from? Are you being taught that it is something that arises from within the brain, or are they coming from an intellectually honest perspective that we really don't know where it comes from at this point?
I've only taken one official neuroscience class so far. I've done lots of, research on neuroscience, like by my own, but like at the university, I've taken one neuroscience class. I'll take many more, like for the next 2 years. But in that class, we were not necessarily taught, but presented with the astonishing hypothesis, which is the idea that your brain, your consciousness, your experience as a human is a result of electrical and chemical activity in your brain. And we didn't really explore that very deeply. It was kind of just like briefly presented, but that's kind of what was like shown to us. Whether or not that's like what most professors agree with, if that's just like kind of part of the curriculum, that was kind of like the idea. They shouldn't really get into it. And so I suppose like from the scientific lens, that's like kind of what is assumed, or at least like based upon, but it wasn't like hardly like taught to us.
Okay. So at the least, they left room for, hey, this is one hypothesis for how things might work.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, that's cool. I know you wanted to explore the connection between neuroscience and spirituality. So in your own self-exploration, what have you discovered with that as you're heading into your neuroscience studies in university?
My opinion is that our consciousness is non-physical, and that each of us has this incredibly complex technological marvel of the entire universe that is our brains, with so many different systems, millions and billions of synaptic connections that allows our consciousness to express in a very complex and individualized and special way. And that our brains are just so incredible that whichever way you want to express your consciousness, basically meaning like whichever way you want to be as a person, whatever choices you want to make with your own free will, your brain can adapt to accommodate that. Like, it's incredibly neuroplastic and adaptable and can change in all these amazing ways. And so that's my opinion, is that our non-physical consciousness expresses through our physical brains, and that they have this interplay together and they can affect each other.
So it's almost like our brains are a receiver for consciousness, essentially.
Yes, I would say that.
Yeah, that's the way you look at it. Yeah, that's kind of the way that I look at it too. And it's pretty interesting, though, to consider that if consciousness is primary, consciousness is also that which creates the brain, in a way.
Yes, there's one of like my videos that was pretty popular was on a theory called orchestrated objective reduction.
Never heard of that. What is that?
It was put together by a neuroscientist and a physicist. And the idea is that like consciousness in the brain is a result of the collapse of quantum superpositions in the microtubules of your brain, that there are it's all a theory, it's just hypothetical, that there could hypothetically be these proteins in the microtubules of your brain that when they collapsed in this like organized way creates your experience of consciousness. So that would imply like, because your consciousness is a result of like the organized collapse of these quantum superpositions, that like consciousness itself would be fundamental in like the quantum superposition. And then our brain was just like organizing it in a coherent way.
Okay. What does a quantum superposition actually mean, though?
It's supposed to mean that before you observe an electron, it can be anywhere within like a probability cloud, and that the moment that you observe it, the superposition collapses and the electron must choose a position to like appear within, right? And so the idea is that like there's these proteins in your microtubules of your brain that are in quantum superposition, meaning that they're not like set in position yet. That is the objective reduction, when the quantum superposition collapses, and the orchestration part is like supposed to be done by your brain, specifically with like your gamma brainwaves, just like the theory that they were proposing, that your gamma brainwaves are like the manifestation, like the macroscopic manifestation of like these microscopic quantum collapses, and that creates your experience of consciousness. It was a very like controversial theory and like kind of seen as like quacky and kooky, but recently there's actually a development with leaves and photosynthesis, that leaves use a process very akin to quantum computing to conduct photosynthesis. And it explains why they're able to be so efficient with like their energy production, because the photon will travel each potential path at the same time and choose the most efficient path, because otherwise like photosynthesis like really wouldn't be able to occur because it'd be too energy inefficient. And so like we now have evidence of like these quantum processes occurring in like, the problem was that biological environments were seen as too like hot, noisy, and like messy to ever support quantum processes, which like in a lab we have to create them in like negative, however many degrees temperatures, and like very, very controlled conditions. So like the idea was like, that's ridiculous. This could never happen in biological environments. But now we do have some evidence of that. So I think it's a very cool theory. I think it's really fun to think about.
I would say that it's a very cool theory. It's so tough for me because like, as I've gone down these various rabbit holes, let's say, and I mean that from a lens of like, oh, not what are they hiding from us type of rabbit holes. I'm talking about the rabbit holes on here's what they claim is occurring. How did they validate that claim? And then just go look at the various papers and studies that have been released related to said claims, like even with things like electrons and photons. I just interviewed Dr. Steve Young, who's a former theoretical physicist, and he described to me some of the primary papers to suggest the existence of photons and electrons, and there's some incredible problems with there. And that's not to say that there isn't some legitimate phenomena happening, right? And like this is the issue, I think, is that there is real phenomena, and human beings are doing their best to describe these phenomena. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's just like the whole quantum paradigm, I really struggle to wrap my mind around that, because it's like how much of this is mathematically derived when looking at real effects that occur and then superimposing mathematical equations on them to suggest what might be and modeling them out, versus just analyzing what is happening in reality and then actually controlling for legitimate variables to see if those variables produce the effects in question. Like, I guess this leads to another important question, like from your perspective, studying this stuff, going into these formal studies on science, is how do you separate out currently, and I know it's always subject to change, what is good evidence versus what is bad evidence? What is empirically demonstrated versus what is just suggested based on strong correlations or based on a strong p-value with some statistical analyses that are done?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is that I'm still learning for sure. But I just try to use everything I've learned to if I'm really trying to evaluate whether or not a specific study is true, first off, what many people don't do is you actually have to read the whole study, which I don't even do most of the time. It's unless I really want to dive into something, but you actually have to read it. It's understanding statistical methods, what does p-value mean? Does that not correlating with the effect size? And I don't know, it's hard. It's a whole process, and I am still learning, but
I appreciate that because I can tell you're super smart, man, and you're inquisitive. Even in the conversations that we were having prior to this, you really, really think deeply about these things. That's cool.
And so it's hard to
I'm sorry I'm asking you tough questions.
It is. It's tough. It's okay. It's hard to label any evidence as good or bad, in and of itself. I think that the way that my worldview has been constructed is taking each piece of evidence, isolated within itself and seeing what greater conclusion that points to, or what it points to, what cannot be. And so I think at this point, the way that I view the world is an amalgamation of different pieces of evidence that each point to a particular picture or particular conclusion. And that's approaching a smaller and smaller likelihood of being true or of not being false.
Got it.
Right?
Have you heard of the neti principle?
Yes.
Okay. That's the spiritual way to do exactly what you're saying. It's getting closer to what might be true by way of falsifying, essentially, pointing to the things that aren't.
That's the real scientific method.
That is, that is the real scientific method. Exactly. Yeah. So here, let me see what I want to explore next. What do you want to explore next?
I haven't thought about that. I think one of my reasons, ways I analyze evidence is that truth cannot be contradictory.
Yes.
And so it's when you have to compare everything you're reading with what you have learned previously. And if there's a contradiction, there must be some reconciliation for that. And so, yeah, I think it's a complicated process of every single new piece of information that you're taking in, you're comparing it with what you have previously known. And if there's a contradiction, you reconcile that and see if it is reconcilable or if one of these things must be false. And from what is left over, you could start to piece together a more accurate, holistic view of reality. And this can be done with any field.
Totally. I mean, that's the self-exploration path too. Like I said, through the neti principle, it's pointing to all the things you are not in order to get to a more complete picture of what you are. It's beautiful. Yeah. So in your education, I know you're just getting into neuroscience, but are there any classes offered related to studying the human biofield at all in any capacity from your understanding?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I would be surprised if there was.
So you're going to kind of explore this on your own, essentially. What have you explored so far regarding the human biofield and its relationship to us and our health and reality? Because this is a topic that I've become obsessed with, so I'd just love to hear what you've discovered from your perspective.
Not much. I'm obviously familiar with the concept of your aura, your biofield, your energetic field. I know the idea that your heart creates an electromagnetic field that extends beyond your body. I've even read some exotic physics about these concepts of scalar, longitudinal waves, scalar physics, in that consciousness might be able to create a sort of field or bubble or realm that's kind of underlying normal electromagnetic processes. But that's all theoretical, of course. But aside from that, not deeply. I feel you probably have some really cool things to tell me about the biofield.
I didn't come super prepared on that. I do know that MD Anderson just published a study recently, and I admittedly have not read it, but they claim to have demonstrated that there is a strong correlation between stopping the development of cancer cells, stopping cancer cells from proliferating, essentially, with the Bengston. I think it's called the Bengston method.
I think it was called the Bengston method. I did see that.
Which is really, really incredible.
Amazing.
So I think a lot of people are really starting to understand this. So what led to you start or led to you beginning to like meditate next to trees? Like what was your first segue or introduction to the biofield?
I think I had like just heard of this concept and the idea that like meditating under trees like could be beneficial. And then so, you know, I looked into like the spiritual paradigm, just the idea that trees are like beneficent, and like, you know, many cultures and spiritual traditions had viewed trees as like brothers, or like, you know, these good, like brotherly loving beings, right? And the, you know, the old idea of like Buddha meditating under the tree. There's lots of spiritual kind of like iconography and like imagery associated with like meditating under the tree. And so there's that whole idea. And then like I tried to connect that with like the actual science of what we know about trees and how they release these like phytoncides, and obviously they create oxygen, and like they're genuinely like doing things for humans that are like loving and beneficial. I believe in Japan, there's a like forest therapy can be medically prescribed, like to just go spend time in nature, whether it's like treat anxiety. I know the phytoncides can like improve your immune system, but it's genuinely just beneficial for your health. I thought it was really cool to like connect those two things.
That's cool. You know, I interviewed this guy named Dean Hall who has reversed cancer twice by forest bathing. I think it's like hilarious that we have a term for just spending an inordinate amount of time in nature, which is like what human beings were doing. Yeah, like it's an event to go like spend a lot of time in nature. So like there's a term for it, because it's just funny thinking about that in relation to human beings used to literally, that's how they lived. It was just like that. Yeah, that's what we do. We spend time in the trees and we're healthy. You know what I mean?
That thought honestly kills me. Like it makes me sad. Like I feel like I'm not like living out my full potential. Like, oh, my ancestors would have been like grounding 24/7, like always breathing in the fresh air in the trees, like spring water charged every single day.
I mean, yeah, for sure, dude. But then at the same time, like I always go back and forth on
and then
this.
They die of tuberculosis.
Well, I don't know about that either. Yeah, I question a lot of that too. But for me, it's more like this modern world that we've created for us, we tend to speak bad about it quite a bit. We tend to speak negatively about it. And yet it's allowed us to connect with other people across the world. It's allowed me to do what I do here, which I enjoy tremendously. It's allowed me to connect with some of my best friends and really do all the things that I do in the world. And then on the flip side, it's provided to our detriment more comfort and convenience, to where we're choosing the harder or the easier wrong thing over the harder right thing consistently. So I have a lot of mixed feelings on the modern world we've created for us. I interviewed this guy named Edmund Knighton, because I think a lot of us in the holistic health space have these fantasies of going back to living the way human beings used to live with no modern technology and anything like this. And I share those typically. Like I really do. I'm like, I wish we could just get rid of all this technology. At some level, I really like that idea. And then he was like, look, man, that's not happening. Like that's not going to happen. So we need to learn to live in a more harmonized way with our modern environments, while really hearkening back to these old ancient ways of being that led to healthy, happy lives, essentially.
Yeah, I completely agree. And with that being said, like, I love that take. Like, I am not the type of person who is like, oh, like, I wish like we didn't have this technology. Like, I wish it would just go away. Like, it's just been so bad. It's done more harm than good. I don't think that at all. I think people like, genuinely tend to look at like the negatives, right? And like, especially with like social media and scrolling, like even with like social media and scrolling, I still think that those have given us like so much, like so many beneficial things, and have made like information so accessible to the average person. Like, I think that right now is the best time to be alive in human history, hands down. And I'm very hopeful about the future, and I love technology. And I think that technology is just going to like help life to get better and better and better, and make the human experience like greater and greater. And so like, with that being said, like, I do feel like, oh, I'm so sad that I can't get the natural health benefits, everything. But I love the modern world, and I think the modern one is amazing. And that like as we continue like to advance our technology and like bring back in these, these ancient wisdom of like really just like being in alignment with nature and like living how we have like evolved to do so, what is like in alignment with our biology, like it will be even better.
Amen. Yeah, I completely agree. So I know that one of the things you wanted to get into was like a lot of neuroscience related topics. And one of those was the neuroscience of Kundalini. Could we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Kundalini was like looking into the spiritual phenomena. It was one of the things that was like the most interesting to me, that it was really just like piqued my interest, because it's such like an intoxicating idea that like you could activate this like dormant energy that like evolves your consciousness and makes you like, you know, peaceful and like a more spiritual being, and you have all this energy. I think that's like, that sounds like an amazing idea to anybody. You could just like upgrade yourself as a human. And I think that there's actually a lot of like neuroscientific like plausibility behind this idea. And like the phenomenon of Kundalini is like clinically observed as like, as real. Like people definitely do experience these sensations and go through these phenomena and even have like, you know.
They have like measurable biochemical changes though too, because I've not looked into this at all really. I did interview Dr. Mara Zapatera, who has looked at cerebral spinal fluid as it pertains to these Kundalini phenomena. So maybe I should say that in a different way, what I said. I haven't personally looked into it, but I interviewed someone who has. And if I remember correctly, there is measured biochemical changes that occur related to these phenomena. I don't remember though.
I believe there are certainly like neurological changes that take place like with spiritual practices, like with meditators, with people who have like been doing these things for a long time. And there are certainly biologically plausible mechanisms by which Kundalini like type symptoms would be created. As to whether these are like studied like directly, I'm not aware of that. And so I think this is like really like a field like in the future that is like going to be like opening up. Like if I mentioned this so far, I think we're in the golden age of neuroscience, and that our brains are like so complex, and we're just reaching a point where we're able to scientifically like actually like truly evaluate and like learn so much about them. So I think there's so much to be learned and explored, but this is like a very interesting avenue.
Most healthcare today operates on an outdated mechanistic model, treating the body like a battlefield rather than a self-healing system. You wait months for an appointment only to receive a rushed diagnosis that labels you rather than truly understanding your unique health. Even in holistic health, many practitioners rely on endless lab tests and supplement protocols, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And the result? Another prescription or supplement regimen that merely suppresses or masks symptoms rather than facilitating true healing, whether the imbalance was physical, emotional, energetic, or a mix of all three. And that's why Dr. Tom Cowling co-founded the New Biology Clinic, to offer something radically different. As one of the most respected natural health doctors in the world, Dr. Cowling has spent decades challenging conventional medicine and advancing a deeper understanding of human biology, water, and natural health. His work isn't just about rejecting the mainstream, it's about offering a more truthful, biologically coherent approach for healing. The New Biology Clinic recognizes that health isn't about fighting disease, it's about restoring balance. You're not a diagnosis, you're an individual with a unique story, and healing should honor that. With virtual consultations available worldwide, the clinic offers a flat-rate monthly membership that gives you direct access to practitioners who take the time to actually listen. Members also get exclusive health live streams, a resource library, and live sessions covering everything from biofield tuning and breathwork to movement and meditation, all designed to support whole body healing. And if you're not ready for a membership, you can book a one-time appointment, sign up for an enrichment-only membership for the healing modalities alone, or schedule a free connection session with one of the care team members to see how the New Biology Clinic can help in your specific situation. This isn't about keeping you dependent on doctors. It's about making you sovereign over your health. Head to newbiologyclinic.com and use code THEWAYFORWARD, and that's spelled The Way, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, for $50 off account activation, or just head to the show notes for more info. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com for $150 off. Your body already knows how to heal, and New Biology Clinic helps you remember. What have you found from a neuroscience perspective as it relates to these Kundalini phenomena?
Yeah, so there's different symptoms. One would be like the electricity tingling like through your body, like surging up your spine. I think especially as it pertains to breath work, there's a plausible explanation for that. And that like when you like do these intense breathing exercises, you're altering like the alkalinity of your blood, and like your CO2 levels are changing, and that can make your neurons like hyper excitable. and that there's these neurons running down your spine called there's your dorsal root ganglion, but it may be called something, your dorsal ganglion, these ganglion neurons, and it could cause them to fire in like a wave-like motion, potentially leading to like that lightning-like sensation. And at the same time, when you're meditating or like in like an inner state, your attention is very inward. And so you're activating these interoceptive neurons, which is like your inner state of being. So those are hypersensitive. So it could kind of explain like the intensity of these sensations that happen to people, as well as like the involuntary movements, which are called like kriyas, I believe, because your vagus nerve.
Talk about electrical.
Your vagus nerve has to do with your motor inhibition, and like in like deep meditative states, I believe your prefrontal cortex can like stop playing as much of a role in that like tonic, like motor inhibition that could lead to these like involuntary movements. Another interesting one is like amrita, or like the nectar cycle, which is like the phenomenon where people describe like a liquid at like the back of their throat, like dripping down their throat. And so like some potential
I've never heard of that. What is that?
It's a Kundalini symptom called like amrita, or like the nectar cycle, or some people call it like the Christ oil.
And the Christus oil.
Yeah, it will like drip down the back of your throat, and people say it tastes sweet. And so that also has to do with like your vagal tone, because I think fundamentally I should say like I think Kundalini is like a nervous system phenomena where like you're getting like greater autonomic flexibility to switch between like sympathetic and parasympathetic, and that it's basically like sensitizing your nervous system, like having it run to like a higher degree. And so I think that's why like these spiritual traditions have like stressed the practice of like purification before attempting these practices, because your nervous system is going to be running on overdrive. So whatever you already have like within your nervous system, like these distortions and these blockages, those are going to be amplified. And Kundalini psychosis, I believe, is like a real clinically recognized phenomenon.
Really? Kundalini psychosis?
I believe so.
I've never even heard of that term either.
Yeah, and so as I was saying with the nectar amrita cycle, your vagal tone like can influence your salivary glands and your nasopharyngeal, like your mucus, and that could maybe explain it. And then also there's been some speculation that there's a plate in like the back of your nose that actually connects to like your spinal fluid. And some people propose that like the spinal fluid could be like dripping down your throat and you could be swallowing it. And that might explain the sweet taste, because your spinal fluid contains glucose.
Interesting. Wow, I've never heard of that. I've never heard of Kundalini psychosis either. You know, from like a more esoteric perspective too, I think it's like another way to look at that outside of the nervous system. And again, this is like pure speculation. This is just how I tend to look at things. Is it's like when you're inducing a very, very spiritual event that allows you to pierce through the veil to some degree with respect to yourself or the nature of this experience, or like really experience the presence of God in a very deep, profound way that you're not ready for, because you are not spiritually adept, because you still have a lot of conditioned beliefs and false identities that you're carrying. Those things get amplified like crazy. Is that kind of what you're suggesting with the whole
that's pretty much exactly what I'm suggesting. That like your nervous system is going to be like amped up. Like there's lots of time people perceive nervous system activation as being like very seesaw-y, like parasympathetic or sympathetic. But there's actually like a hypothesis about your vagus nerve. I believe it's called like ventral vagal activation or something along those lines. And that like it's like more of like a mix between the two, where it's like you're calm and you're focused, but you're also like energized and like stimulated and activated. And that's like exactly what people describe in like these more spiritual kind of like higher consciousness mindsets. Like you're full of energy, you're completely energized and like alert and aware, but at the same time, you're very calm and regulated and focused. But if you're getting this like high nervous system activations and these fluctuations, and you like have all these like fears or psychological traumas or distortions like in your psyche, it would make sense that like that's what's going to be amplified.
Have you ever had a Kundalini experience yourself?
Not in the way that people describe them as like a lightning bolt shooting up my spine.
I've had one, dude.
Really?
It was wild. It actually relates to the law of one, and I know you're a big fan of the law of one.
I do love the law of one.
This could be a good segue into that. So back in 2019, I think this occurred. I actually have the note for the dream on my phone because it was so profound. So I had started reading The Law of One within that last calendar year and I don't remember exactly which session of The Law of One that I was on, but that night I went to sleep and had a dream where my grandpa's sitting across from me, and I'm at this table in a really high tower, and a bunch of random people from my life are at the table, and my grandpa's sitting across from me, like I said. And in reality at the time, I absolutely hated my grandpa for a variety of reasons. I was estranged from my dad at the time, hadn't spoken to him in 2 years up to this point. And in the dream, though, we're playing this game where we're trying to guess what the other person is thinking about. And I asked my grandpa if he believes reincarnation is real. Now, in reality, my grandpa is a Serbian Orthodox Christian. So like, absolutely not. He'd be like, no, that's demonic or something like that, right? And when I asked him this in the dream, he answered yes, but it was like a reluctant yes. It was like he was scared to admit that he really did believe reincarnation was real. And whether or not I was actually talking to the higher self or the authentic self of my grandpa, that's speculation, but I got the sense in the dream, as at least as it pertained to my experience of the dream, that I was speaking to my grandpa's higher self. Because in reality, my grandpa has gone through a lot of things and has done a lot of things that he's not proud of. Ultimately, just the cycles of generational trauma that are passed down from person to person. And so the answer that I got from him in this dream suggested to me, when he said yes, I like instantly knew that he's saying yes because he can't reconcile that this is his only shot at this experience because of all of the stuff that he's gone through and, you know, the harm that he had caused other people and things like this. And in the midst of that, him answering yes, I felt a deep sense of love and compassion for him. And again, in reality, I absolutely despised him at the time. But in this dream, I was like, I just felt so much love and compassion for my grandpa. And so I audibly said to him in the dream, Grandpa Danny, I love you. And then he responded, I love you too. And he started to cry. And then at that moment, I lifted, I don't know if it was out of my body, but I just know that whatever I was lifted above everyone else and started vibrating from head to toe to where it was the most profound love that I had ever experienced in my life. And it was kind of scary because I had never experienced something like that before, like where I was like, whoa, what is going on? Then I woke up in reality. 6 a.m., I'm still vibrating from head to toe to where it's like, if I were to speak out loud, it would sound like my voice was audibly vibrating. And it wasn't like the feeling where your arm's asleep or something like that, or your legs are asleep. It was vibrating from head to toe to where it was like ringing my ears. It was insane. Later that day, I read a passage in The Law of One where Don is asking Ra, who's, you know, the social memory complex that's being channeled by Carla, how they communicate with people who are seeking in the direction of the Law of One. Because Ra is discussing how we are called upon by many people. We don't infringe upon the law of free will. You have to call upon us in order for us to help you. And that might look like calling upon angels. That might look like praying to God. Like we are representative of the one, right? The one creator. And they go on to say that they primarily inspire people through dreams. Uh-huh. And dude, when I read that, the day after I had this experience, literally the day after I had this experience, I was like, okay. I was already picking up when reading this material that there's, you know, a lot of validity to it. And I still have some skepticism around it. I think that's healthy, man. Like, that's totally healthy. And like, especially when it comes to channeled material,
1,000,000%.
Like, who knows what you're channeling? Could it be a function of someone's subconscious mind? Like, yes to all that. That totally could be a possibility. I just know my experience of this material suggests that there's a lot of gravy to this material. There's some stuff about it that's like,
I felt the same way, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so anyway, that was my experience of the Kundalini thing. And like, if that is what a Kundalini awakening is like, dude, it is incredibly uncomfortable, but also this feeling of love and bliss at the same time. And I could see where someone who has done like zero work on themselves might have a very uncomfortable time with that.
Yeah, that's the exact kind of, like, that sounds incredible. That's the exact kind of experience that you hear like so many people talk about. And so like, I want to say, like, I'm not trying to even suggest that like an experience like Kundalini or a process like that could be completely explained by the materialistic science that we now have. But I'm saying that I think that there is real like neurological, physiological validity, and that there is like a physical process happening to our bodies that like also has this like profound spiritual component.
This brings up another good point that I know you wanted to discuss a little bit, and maybe we should talk about this before we get into the law of one, that oftentimes in the spiritual community, people can jump to these like esoteric explanations for how things occur, or these claims that seem incredibly woo-woo that could make a lot of mainstream leaning people completely discredit them before even exploring whether these phenomena and the supposed causes related to this phenomena, just the entirety of the paradigm, it has any validity to it whatsoever. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Many such cases. I think that like very, very commonly in the spiritual community, people jump to spiritual conclusions too quickly. Like in that like these phenomena that are occurring, like whether it be like Kundalini or like manifestation or whatever it is, like are like real observable phenomena. But I think where they go wrong, where it really turns off like people in like the scientific community who are very like scientifically, like empirically minded, is in like acting as if they know exactly why it happened. I think like the much better, the much more scientific approach, like that we were talking about earlier, like the 90-day principle, is like, here is the phenomenon. The phenomenon is happening. Like first, you just need to get somebody to observe the phenomenon. You can say like, this is my hypothesis as to why it is happening, instead of like saying this is why this thing is happening.
Asserting a cause.
Asserting a cause, because that's huge red flags in any scientific thing's mind. That's like immediate red flags. Like, like where's your study? Like, how do you know this, right? And like in many cases, like I think that there are like physiological, like neurological, like physical explanations to things that people may like be too quick to assign something esoteric to. Not to say that there are not esoteric things happening, but it should be like, you should be going down the list, because if there is like a physical, like more simple explanation, like that's a good thing. That's better.
Because grounded in reality.
Yeah, that's better because it's easier to understand. It's easier to replicate. It makes more sense to our human minds. But then like when something is truly mystical, truly esoteric, truly spiritual and unexplainable with the paradigm that we have at hand, then that's very special. And that's something we can look into and go into with an open mind of exploration, but not trying to like act as if we know what is happening before that point, or to like make a call too early as to like why something is happening or what is like really going on behind that.
Would you say that this is a fair assessment? This is a very general statement. Too many people in the sort of spiritual consciousness space are quick to assert a non-physical cause that they don't have direct evidence of. And then too many people in the quote unquote scientific community are too quick to, again, it's all about how it's spoken and how they share and present the studies that they do. But in general, they're too quick to say it's likely a physical cause, or at least assert in the language that they use that it's a physical cause, while if you go read the study, they're really just saying that we suggest that it might be this, this, and this. You see what I'm saying?
Yes,
there, though,
bingo,
right?
1,000,000%. I think spiritual people are too quick to like jump to conclusions and assign like a spiritual cause, something that may be more empirically observable and studyable under like physical phenomena. And I think people within the scientific community are much too quick to assert, or even from like a base level of like assumption, or assuming that any spiritual phenomena must be explainable by normal materially reductionistic like causes, right? That like the way that they're approaching it isn't like maybe like our ring of objectivity for what is scientific and what is possible in reality could be expanded. They're saying, how can we fit this into like the way we view reality, like already, like what we already understand to be like true about, physics and like the world at large.
Yeah. I think that's really fair. I think that would even extend beyond the spiritual phenomena that we're referring to, because you'd mentioned just then that the scientific community is too quick to imply or turn to automatically this must be a physical cause for this spiritual phenomena that we're referring to. But I would even extend that into like all of science, right? Obviously, like we can throw a ball and watch a ball do something, and like there is a lot of validity to classical physics, like of course, right? But what I'm suggesting is, even when it comes to again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. I've done too many episodes on this at this point. I'm almost tired of talking about it myself. But like infectious diseases, right? I'll just give you an example.
I actually have a great example for this topic.
Yeah, please.
I think something that really encapsulates this idea, like for me, that I like to make videos about is manifestation and the law of attraction, because I think that's something that on both ends of the aisle, like people are missing components of it. I think in the spiritual community, people are too quick to assert that it's like purely a result of like your consciousness influencing reality. And that if you visualize enough and if you really feel it enough in your mind, like this is just going to like flow to you effortlessly and you won't even have to do anything. And then I think that the scientific community would say like, this is purely a result of like, I think neuroscientifically, there's your reticular activating system, which is the part of your brain that is analyzing patterns. It's like filtering the 11 million bits of information per second that your senses at large are taking in. And it's deciding the about like 50 to throw into your conscious awareness. And it's doing this based upon your underlying like beliefs and like values and like assumptions about life. And so if you're assuming like I'm a loser, I can't do anything, your brain's saying like, oh, he thinks he's a loser. Like let's show him the information that proves he's a loser. But you're saying like if you're, visualizing and reaffirming and doing these affirmations to become like the person you want to be, you're saying I'm a winner, like I can succeed. Your brain's like, okay, let's show him the information he needs to succeed. Science would like to assert that is like the only cause behind like manifestation or the law of attraction. But I think like that there's like a higher level of objectivity in which like it is both like the neurological, like, reprogramming of your mind to show you that which you need to succeed. And I do think that there is some aspect of like guidance from your higher self, from a higher like subconscious version of you or your mind influencing reality on some level, because I don't think that the neurological explanation is enough to encompass the phenomena that we see in the way of like synchronicity and just highly unlikely circumstances. In my mind, like what I was talking about, I think is a much more likely explanation of reality, what is truly happening, is some combination of both. Yeah. So I think this is the perfect example.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I think that's a totally fair assessment there. And I think the deeper layered questions that we need to ask there, like even when it comes to some of these physical happenings that occur inside the brain, is what causes those physical happenings to occur? And then we take that a step back. Okay, what causes those to occur? Okay, what causes that to occur? Okay, what causes that to occur? And I was going through The Secret of Light by Walter Russell before we clicked record, and I was trying to find that freaking quote that I bring up so many times, and I'm gonna have to paraphrase it yet again, is that, okay, I want to say that I don't fully agree with Walter Russell on this. I don't think that it's futile to try to figure out cause and effect in reality if we are doing so from the position of exploring this realm with childlike curiosity and wonder, rather than like desperately clinging on to we need to know, and if we don't know, then we don't feel secure in our reality.
I love that.
Right? But what he says is it is futile to try to figure out cause and effect in this reality. And again, this is paraphrased, because there is only one true cause in reality, and that is God. I think he says the infinite creator. I don't remember exactly what he says, but he's suggesting that like God is the one true cause. And like, it's interesting to consider that, right? Because what can we empirically demonstrate with 100% certainty that we know to be true? And there's, from my experience, from my understanding, from my exploration of like so-called empirical research and peer-reviewed studies on a variety of topics, like there's very little that we can know with 100% certainty about anything in this reality.
It's really, really hard.
Dude, it's really hard. Like it's really, really hard. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the interesting things about like neuroscience. Like one of the funny things I've gotten as like someone who's really into like the spiritual phenomena and ideas and philosophies, like us, like someone studying neuroscience. It's like, dude, neuroscience is the most like reductionistic, like science. I say like everything you experience, like all of consciousness is just a result of this electrical and chemical activity in your brain. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but like, I don't think that's the only explanation. I think
but like, how could they prove that? That's the thing. Yeah, no,
dude. They can't. I don't think they can at all. I don't think that's a fact, like in the slightest. But I think one of the cool things is like, even when you're getting down to like the like materially reductionistic phenomena of like, oh, all your personality, all your brain is like a result of these like networks in your brains. But like when you're talking about like how do we get them to change? Like for example, like with law of attraction, manifestation, you want to manifest your dream life. And so you're trying purposefully, like with this knowledge of neuroscience that I'm giving you on my Instagram page. No, I'm just kidding. Is like that you want to reprogram your reticular activating system to show you the information that is pertinent to achieving your goals. And so it's like you're consciously trying to reprogram your brain, and that is causing your brain to reprogram physically. And so it's like, how is that happening? It's like, it's a result of your will, your consciousness as a conscious being who is like here having this experience. Like, what is that? How does that work?
Exactly. And that's the point that I'm getting at, is that there's like a deeper underlying metaphysical layer that I think much of the current scientific community and the education system, especially as it pertains to something like neuroscience, aren't really addressing. Sometimes they're giving lip service to it, but they don't like really address the foundational problem with that. Have you read any of Mark Gober's book or any of his work?
Mm-mm.
You got to. He's a dear friend of mine. He's actually based in Austin, so I could link you up with him. He's incredible. He's done so many deep dives into these topics. But I think just in general, my general point where I become frustrated with this scientific community, in air quotes, is that they are too quick to jump to the conclusion that it must be a physical cause. Like they completely cast aside the metaphysical happenings or the possibility of metaphysical happenings with respect to this reality.
And I'll say, like, most of the time it is, you know, like in most scenarios, there actually is like a plausible, like physical cause, you know, that and I can see how someone who holds that viewpoint could like reaffirm that to themselves every time, because they could say like, oh, every time someone thought it was esoteric or mystical, people, you know, prayed to the lightning gods, like we discovered this scientific cause for it and we could explain it. So I see why somebody would think that, but I think that there are certain phenomena which, like, at least to me, are not satisfactorily explained like whatsoever by that paradigm.
Yeah, give me some examples.
I think like specifically like experiences in consciousness, like near-death experiences, examples of like clairvoyance or like, you know, deep intuition, like knowing psychic abilities. Like, dude, like just the other day, I was talking with my mom and my grandma because I was going to help them out, and we were discussing my grandpa who had died, and also my mom's younger sisters who are twins, and something that had happened with them where one of the twins had gotten into a car crash and like basically died. Like she was okay, but I think she had gone into shock and like her blood pressure dropped like super, super low. And so she was basically like dead. And both my grandma, her mom, and her sister, her twin, like started freaking out, like completely unbeknownst, like that this had happened. But like her twin was like, something has happened to Rob. Like, what is, like, calling, like literally ran out of wherever she was and was like driving off to go find her because something's wrong with Rob. Like, she is not okay. Like, she's like dying. And then even just recently, I had an experience like in Costa Rica where like we were doing like a journaling like idea, like a deep like contemplative kind of exercise. And all of a sudden I felt this like presence behind me. And like my entire life I had been like told that I'm very like my grandfather, because he was a very smart man. He was a doctor. And, you know, people had said he was like one of the most brilliant people they'd ever met. You know, he's just this really smart guy. And people said like, you remind me of him, like you're like him. And I felt him like behind me. I felt like my grandfather behind me. And I got like the impression, I will say he committed suicide. And so I got the impression that like I had been like gifted with his like mind, and like my mission, like my purpose in this life was like to make use of this like beautiful gift of this powerful mind, but not like to buckle under like the weight of it as he had. And then right when I said that, I explained it like when it happened. And then like one of my now like best friends, like Netta, who's actually the owner of the company Soultopia that I wanted to mention, said, me too. I also just felt my grandfather behind me. Like at the same time. Unrelated.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
And so I think that there are experiences that even if you just ask someone, have you ever experienced something supernatural, something that you can't explain? Most people will say yes. And so I don't think that science can explain those things. I think there's some greater level of objective reality in which like we are tapping into or experiencing.
Right. Man, I couldn't agree more. I've had so many experiences like that in my life too. And here's the thing that is trippy to me And maybe this is a function of whatever that component of the mind is that you brought up, where we're like so good at pattern recognition. But I tend to think not. I tend to think it is akin to us exercising a muscle that we have forgotten that we have, for all of us in mankind, because we have been indoctrinated to believe that we live in a purely material, physical realm. And for me, when I focus on these things happening, when I actually pay attention to them and don't chalk it up to coincidence, or I don't chalk it up to like, oh, this is just my mind playing tricks on me. It's like, no, that was real that I experienced. Nope, I can't explain that with a physical cause. This is pointing to something greater. The more those experiences tend to occur in my life. And dude, I can name countless ones that I don't need to belabor the point because I brought up so many of them on this podcast, but ones that are just absolutely undeniable, that have no physical explanation whatsoever, that can't possibly be my mind playing tricks on me. I'll just give you one just small example. I remember one day I was feeling very just defeated, like was really struggling financially. We had just had our new baby, so I had just become a dad of 3. Entrepreneurial life is, you go through ebbs and flows, let's just put it that way. Mm-hmm. And I got on my knees and I was like, God help me, because I felt so defeated. I didn't know what to do. There were just so many things happening at that point in my life that I also now realize were for me, and also I was creating those conditions in my own life by feelings of lack and unworthiness and things like this. But setting that aside, I got on my knees and said, God help me, because that's the only thing I could think to pray. Dude, the next day, I kid you not, my dear friend Rachel, who's just very like psychically connected to my family, for lack of a better term, texted me out of the blue and said, if you asked for help, God sent me. When I said that prayer, there was no one around me. I was by myself because I don't like to display desperation in front of my wife and my family and things like that. I was completely by myself and I was just like, God help me. And then Rachel texted me the next day and said, if you asked for help, God sent me. And that alone was the help. Mm-hmm. Ironically, it was like, oh, there's something greater than me that I'm inextricably linked to, that I can connect to, and that's the way I believe it, that is paying attention to what I'm doing, that is listening to my prayers, so to speak. And by me calling upon it out of a genuine moment and asking for help, it showed that it is listening to me. It is hearing my prayers. And literally just the act of my friend Rachel texting me and saying, if you asked for help, God sent me, that was the help. Mm-hmm. And like, that's undeniable. How do you explain that physically? That's beautiful. You can't. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot explain that physically. I'm sure someone would try to explain that physically, but it's just not, you can't explain that physically, man. Yeah. I mean, nothing has given me more peace in my life, and like strength, like to push on, like to go for broke, like to try to do great things, to not just be like afraid and like stick with what's like reasonable, right? Then like that idea that like I am watched out for, like I am cared for, I am loved, it gives me like the agency. It's like how with like kids, like with children who are taken care of like more and actually have like a stronger attachment to like their parental figure, like are more like risk taking and like confident like in going out like and meeting people and interacting with strangers, like whereas people who have like less of a connection with their parents as like a baby like tend to be like more antisocial. It's kind of that same concept where it's like this like connection, this like faith and this trust, and like God gives me like the permission to go out and do great things. And so on that note of like intuition and like synchronicity, like the only reason I'm here is kind of something like that. Like my whole journey was starting to make content on Instagram was that I watched, like I attended like a masterclass with like my now content coach, Ari Malloy. And like I paid like $6,000, which is like basically all my savings at the time to like do his program. And like I knew in my mind, like I know this isn't like a rash, and it's just like most people would hear that and say, that's crazy, like you're wasting your money. But I just knew, I just felt correct. Like it just felt right. As like I had so much belief in myself and so much faith, like I knew I could do it and I knew it would be worth it. And also like me putting something on the line like really gave that like that fire and that motivation to where like I listened, I showed up, I did everything I was supposed to. I made videos every single day and it worked out for me. I like went on that retreat in Costa Rica. That was with my content coach, and I met Netta, whose business I was going to talk about today, and I attended her event and just like I'm on this road now and I'm in this room on this podcast because like I trusted that intuition, this just knowing that
this would work out well, that I can do it.
Yeah, like all the signs in your reality are physically pointing to you should not do this. Here's all the reasons why you could.
Yeah, I knew that in my mind.
Yeah.
Like, I know this is not like an intelligent financial decision. Like, I know people would be like, dude, you're wasting your money. Like,
that's
you're
where
getting
the
scammed.
gravy is, though, man. Like you have to listen to that thread deep within you, that thread that is pulling on you that this is your path.
Yeah,
like
and the crazy thing is, I'm not usually like that. Like people who know me, like I'm pretty conservative, and like especially with money and just in general, I'm like, tend to be conservative and like kind of reserved. But in that moment, like in that specific circumstance, I was like, I'm going for it. Like, I know I can do this. Like, I believe in myself.
For generations, our ancestors lived in harmony with nature, thriving on a nose to tail approach to nourishment. Organ meats, often called nature's multivitamin, were a staple, providing essential nutrients that supported energy, brain function, skin, gut health, and reproductive vitality. Yet today, these deeply nourishing foods are largely missing from modern diets, leaving many of us unknowingly depleted. Let's be real though, most of us aren't eating organ meats the way our ancestors did. Whether it's the taste, texture, or simply a shift away from traditional foods, we've lost touch with this vital source of nourishment. And that's where Paleo Valley's grass-fed organ complex comes in. It's an easy way to reconnect with ancestral wisdom and replenish the nutrients we're meant to thrive on. Sourced from grass-fed cows on small regenerative farms in the US, this blend includes liver, heart, and kidney, freeze-dried to preserve their full nutritional integrity. No fillers, no synthetic processing, just pure, bioavailable nourishment. Those who incorporate the grass-fed organ complex notice more energy, balanced moods, and renewed vitality, sometimes within days. If this speaks to you, you can explore more by visiting the show notes or heading to paleovalley.com/thewayforward. And in this case, forward is fully spelled out. So paleovalley.com/theway, FORWARD. And a 15% discount will be automatically applied at checkout. Have you read The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer?
Mm-mm.
Dude, highly recommend that book.
There's too many good books that exist,
so many good books. I've read so many good books in the last 10 years. That's one that I highly recommend, though. It's all about like surrendering to the will of God, the universe, the creator, the one mind, whatever you want to call it, and like just showing up each day and saying yes to those things that appear to you if they resonate deep within your body, even if all of the things in your reality are pointing to like you should not make that decision. If it is a clear yes inside of you, you do it. And you just know, you just trust that God will have your back as long as you continue to follow that thread. That's it. It's beautiful. And that sounds like an example of it though. Yeah. I want to go back to just like one example, because especially knowing that you're going to be pre-med, and I don't want to get into this too much, but going back to where the scientific community will assert or imply or like exclusively look for a physical cause pertaining to various phenomena, right? So in infectious disease research, a dear friend of mine who's a naturopath out of Australia wrote an incredible book that I highly recommend you read. Another book. It's called Can You Catch a Cold? Untold History in Human Experiments.
I've got homework after this.
Dude, you do. I'll send you a few books that I highly recommend reading. But in his book, Can You Catch a Cold? He basically scoured the historical research that has been published pertaining to basically germ theory, this idea that healthy people become sick when exposed to sick people or their bodily fluids, and tried to find any studies that have been done to validate that idea, because we're all taught that as, again, an irrefutable, well-established scientific fact, even though that's not what the scientific community actually says about it. That's how it is relayed to us and in all of society. We're taught that that's like already well-established, that healthy people become sick when exposed to sick people or their bodily fluids. And when he looked at the data over the course of several years, like looking at all these studies that have been done, he found that in the over 204 studies that have been done attempting to demonstrate this idea throughout history, the modal or most frequently occurring result was that zero contagion was demonstrated. And in the examples where contagion was demonstrated, or just people became sick after being exposed to healthy or sick people or their bodily fluids, any one or more of the following things occurred. The nocebo effect was a strong factor present, and I can give you an example of that. Unnatural methods of transmission were used, like taking an absurd amount of blood from a person who was sick and injecting it into the healthy volunteers. Or in many cases that failed, by the way, too. Or for example, and this, I don't know if Daniel covers this in his book, but the claimed evidence to prove the transmission of polio. They took spinal cord tissue from a person who was sick with real symptoms, right? Like that's the effects. And they ground that up and then drilled a hole in the monkey's head and injected it into the monkey's skull. And the monkey got sick and died. And they claimed, voila, that demonstrates what happens in nature, right?
Monkeys always get the short end of
I know,
the
dude.
stick in scientific experiments.
Monkeys, rats, and ferrets and rhesus macaques, like they just get the short end of the stick. Yeah, but the point that I'm getting at is in his book, he also covers what we were talking about earlier, mass psychogenic illness and mass social contagion, which clearly indicate that people will get sick in large groups, oftentimes just based on suggestion. And one of the studies that he cites in his book is this drug, this antidepressant in New Zealand had just gone off patent, which means that a bunch of companies were able to make their own generic version of the drug. And this one specific generic version, a lot of people began reporting side effects to in New Zealand. And there are 27 common side effects reported across the board to whatever New Zealand's adverse events reporting system is. Mainstream media decides to run a story on this drug that is causing these problems. And for whatever reason, we can only speculate why, they only named 6 of the 27 symptoms in their story. What then followed was adverse events reports skyrocketed by like 470%, but only in the 6 symptoms that were named by the mainstream media. So people literally expressed real physiological symptoms, 470% increase just in those 6 symptoms, despite there being 21 other common symptoms that were occurring. Those didn't spike. Only the 6 symptoms that were named by the mainstream media. And then he cites another example, what's called the Tanganyika.
That's incredibly interesting.
It's incredible. Tanganyika laughter epidemic, which is where this girls' school in now what is modern day Tanzania, these girls began breaking out in hysterical laughter, and the other symptoms included them feeling like they were being chased. And this quote unquote spread to a half of the school to where they had to shut down the school. Then when the girls went back to their villages began breaking out in uncontrollable laughter and feelings like they were being chased. And it impacted like a number of villages in the area over the course of 18 months. And they reopened the school and then had to shut it down again because of this laughter epidemic. So unless they had discovered the quote unquote laughter virus or something like this, or the point that I'm getting at is this is clearly pointing to some other non-physical causes that might be occurring with this because they've never been able to demonstrate a physical cause related to these phenomena. Have
you heard of I think there was a historical example of this with like a dancing outbreak or like the dancing flu, maybe is what it was called.
Yeah.
And like there's a whole village that like one person started like manically dancing for like hours and then people started joining in and eventually like the entire village basically like danced until they like collapsed on the ground and could not even move. And I think that's a classic example of psychogenic illness. I think I may have heard like a theory to explain it was like moldy bread or something, but who knows, right?
Yeah, that's funny. Always trying to find the physical cause.
True.
One thing that I really want to talk about with you is, as someone who's studying neuroscience right now and is pre-med, you're on the pre-med track, right? What is the impetus for, like, what is driving you to want to become a medical doctor, especially like knowing what you know and having done the research that you've done up to this point and knowing how much corruption exists within the medical field? Again, I want to emphasize that like most doctors are very well-intentioned, good people. Like I want to emphasize that they are. And there are a variety of issues we could get into with respect to the scientific literature, with respect to what doctors are taught, what they're not taught, how little education they actually get on things like nutrition, how much these other non-physical factors are left out, how much the natural healing world is sort of left out of the equation. There are so many things that we could get into related to that, but I'm just curious to know like what is driving you to want to become a medical doctor?
Yeah, I think like first and foremost, I'm motivated to pursue like schooling after college just because it's like I've been instilled with the idea like education is very important, and I'm lucky enough to have like parents who can support me like through my education and like support me going to more college like after school. So for me, it's like it's a good choice. And so in the past, I've kind of flip-flopped between the idea of pursuing like a PhD or even a PhD MD or just an MD. As of right now, I'm thinking of just pursuing an MD. One, just because I really do want to like deeply understand both sides and like make sure I'm never coming from a place of like not actually knowing what I'm talking about.
That's totally fair.
And so like to really to actually be able to truly like criticize something and like, want to like improve it, like first to actually like understand it and really like know the inner workings and like really have been taught that. And then also at the same time, like honestly, just like a matter of like, career security. Cause like I'm doing like my Instagram right now and I plan to keep like developing my personal brand, like as much as I possibly can, like throughout school and medical school. But then like I want to do the MD to like get credibility with that and be able to speak to people's like health and how they can help them like from a place of like authority and education. And also just like in the situation where, I don't end up pursuing like personal brand or social media influencer or that sort of like realm, I still am a doctor, and can do a clinical practice. But like, honestly, like as of right now, I'm not 100% sure like where my path will lead. Like if I'll end up doing clinical practice or if I'll end up in sort of like a science, like educator, public role, like communicating these ideas. I had considered, PhD for a little bit just for like the fact of being able to like conduct my own research. And
PhD
like,
in what would you want to pursue?
UT has a cool neuroscience program, but like some PhDs are like customizable and like you can kind of pick your own thesis in that. Like I may even be able to explore some of these ideas of like connecting neuroscience like with spirituality. But at the end of the day, it's like not as like secured and like guaranteed, and that like if all doesn't go according to plan, I have like a PhD, I don't have as many options as like with an MD. And then I also think that like we do just need like good people in these positions, in these MDs, like that, like doctors who really understand like the full picture and are trying to like work from within the system to like correct it and like really provide patients like with the care they need and direct them in the ways that they need to go, instead of like, just anybody.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair perspective too, especially like someone who's coming from the lens of being very skeptical of all sides of everything, and someone who, how do I put this, is taking into account the possible non-physical, metaphysical, spiritual happenings of this human experience we're having. I think most medical doctors today don't account for that stuff. And I know that you're very much into natural health. We definitely share that together. And I think someone like that going into the system is a net benefit, right? I just wonder what it'll look like. I'll have to interview you again a few years from now, like as you're in medical school, like your experience of it. Because I've interviewed so many MDs that I'm dear friends with, like Dr. Andy Kaufman and a variety of others who just share that so much of what they learned in medical school is a complete inversion of what is true. I wonder how challenging that'll be for you if you have that same experience. Yeah,
I have also heard, certain MDs say that, so honestly, I don't know what to expect, or even, at the end of the day, what I'll end up doing. But as of right now, I'm planning on studying for the MCAT next semester. And like, I really do love like that information and just like the intricacy of the human body and like the actual like cellular workings and mechanisms. But like, I know that like a lot of what you learn in med school is also like not that, just like drug interactions and like what to prescribe when according to certain diseases,
Yeah.
And even just going into like medical with like the idea of like what we were just talking about, just like the psychological like impact upon like health and like placebo and like nocebo effect, like how like your mindset and your perception like can completely alter like your pathology and like how you heal. I think that's something that like, most people and like especially most doctors like don't even take into account, don't even, consider, because you're only looking at it from like a machine perspective, like a mechanic fixing like a car, but like the driver of the car of your body like really has like a massive impact about like how you heal.
Dude, that's the thing. How much of an impact does it have?
That's the question.
That's the question, because man, I've come to the perspective that I don't know where I fully sit with this, but that it has by far the largest impact on our physiology. That's what I'll say. Like, I think there's clear indication with the nocebo effect, the placebo effect. Like even in my own life, as I've dissolved a variety of conditioned beliefs regarding what I thought caused illness and have now leaned on more of the perspective that it is my emotional state, that it is my thoughts that are causing my illness, I can attribute every single time when I get sick to a period when I was incredibly stressed or when I was having recurring negative thoughts that I didn't want to fully entertain. And then that itself became a recurring negative thought, like, oh, I'm struggling to entertain these negative thoughts. Like those are the times when I actually start to get sick.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. That's an idea I've played around with in my head, especially as like pertaining to cancer. Like many people like, some people put forth the idea, I think it's called German New Medicine. And that like, yeah, I haven't very much, but just, I know the idea that like cancer and like physical illness can be like a physical manifestation of like psychological troubles, and distortions. And so like, I've considered the idea in my mind where it's like, you hear people treating cancer with like all sorts of different like various modalities and different things and like things that are completely unrelated and even like opposite things. Like someone's like, oh, I went on a carnivore diet and it cured my cancer. Or like, oh, I went on a fruitarian diet, cured my cancer. Oh, I only ate juice and I cured my cancer. And so I think like one thought that I've had in the past is that like maybe like the act of like doing something, like pursuing like a treatment to heal yourself is like a psychological like nudge that like, tells your body like, I am trying to heal, like I am like vying myself, and then like the cancer can go away. That's obviously very speculative, but dude, I've played around with that idea before because like it feels like people treat cancer with everything, like random modalities that have nothing to do with each other. There may be some psychological like link or like something that has to do with that.
I think you're spot on, man. I think it's obviously there might be objective healing properties to some of these things, whether it's like forest bathing, like the example I brought up earlier, or like doing a water fast or doing like a juice cleanse or doing Gerson therapy or something like this. Like I'm not suggesting that there isn't some objective healing properties to those things, but I think the moment that someone makes the decision in their mind, like the genuine belief that, oh, this thing is going to heal my cancer. And then also sets down a path of healing cancer, like truly believes that and goes for it, that itself is what helps to heal the cancer.
Yeah, I've definitely had that thought in the past.
Yeah, it's wild to think about. And then again, it goes back to like how much is it our perception shaping everything, like our physiology, like every bit of our physiology. I don't know the answer to that. But in my experience, dude, German New Medicine has been incredibly accurate. And I say that with, there's a piece of me that like doesn't fully want all of it to be accurate, but it has been accurate in every single example in my own life.
Yeah, what I mean, it's like the placebo and nocebo effect are like ubiquitously, universally accepted as true, but like the implications of that are not often considered. You know what I mean? Like that's like, the golden standard of science is like placebo controlled. Like that's crazy. In every single scientific study, like in the entire planet, like to actually like, meet the golden standard, we have to control for the fact that your conscious intent is going to change the results that anything has upon your body. Like that's significant. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's such a valid point. Like the scientific community completely overlooks that there are countless examples of people having real biochemical effects in their body, real physiological effects, whether it's like symptom reduction or the expression of symptoms on the nocebo side of things.
And it's not a maybe, it's a given.
It's a given.
You have to control for it. And like we know this, especially even with like, meditation, like neuroscientific, like we see like people who do meditation, like it changes like your epigenetic expression. Like it can even like someone, I forgot their name, is showing that it can increase the length of your telomeres, which like the caps on the end of your chromosomes that like cause you to age, it can prevent you from aging. It changes the way your brain functions. Like it changes like the amplitude of gamma brainwaves you're producing. Like your mind, your conscious intent to do anything, to be a certain way, to be more peaceful, to be more focused, will, not even might, will cause your body to change. Just the intent to have that happen, or the belief that something will happen. Unequivocally.
Yeah, unequivocally. And it's just wild though, like, because you bring up such a good point, how the scientific community, like, just sort of has that as a background given, like, yeah, we know that'll occur. Like, but whoa. Let's pause for a second. Why? Like, what's going on there with that effect? Like, yeah, this substance might do that against the placebo, but hold on a second. What's going on with the placebo? Why are people getting better and having real physiological effects related to an inert saline placebo, or just like the belief that they're receiving something helpful? Like, I can't believe that is so overlooked. And even in the alternative healing space, dude, like that's my point, is I don't think people really appreciate how much our perception of something actually has an impact on our physical bodies and then possibly the nature of this experience. Like that is like all I think about lately.
Yeah. I mean, it's genuinely, kind of hard to wrap your head around, because every human in existence, basically from the day you're born, is conditioned like to look externally, that your inner world, like that what happens to you is all a result of like what happens to you externally. And this is like the fundamental lesson that pretty much every spiritual tradition is teaching, across the millennia, across centuries. Like all the answers you're looking for, like everything that you have ever needed is within, is like as a product of your own mind, of your own consciousness. So that even applies to like health, but that's something you can only discover like for yourself. You have to experiment with it really and like play around with it and like see the evidence and like really conduct your own scientific experiments. Like you apply the scientific method to your own life and like using your perceptions. And so it's why you can't really ever convince somebody of that until they're ready to like accept it, until they want to like accept that.
Yeah. Amen, man. And speaking of like spiritual traditions and esoteric topics, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the Law of One and A Course in Miracles. I believe A Course in Miracles is literally sitting on the shelf right behind you. Yeah, how has that had an impact on your life? And I guess as a second question, you can answer this later. I'll bring it up again. I would like to explore how that might inform how you will go about becoming a doctor.
Yeah, the Law of One has like hands down been the most influential like thing that I've ever read. Like when I read it, I came at it very skeptically and like basically like not open-mindedly. Like there's no way.
How did you come across it in the first place?
My friend told me about it.
Okay.
My friend told me about actually my friend had told me about it like years before, like prior when I had first met him and like mentioned something from it. And I like actually laughed in his face because I thought it was so crazy. But then like I ended up, just looking into it, like reading it. And I don't want to assert that like it's true, but just it deeply resonated with me. And like the concepts in which it discussed like the way that reality works and like why we are here as souls, like we're here to like learn and to grow and to evolve and to like learn how to love and how like our minds affect reality. All these things just resonated as like being like profoundly like true to me. So that had like a massive like impact just on the way that I view life. I stopped, looking at everything that happened to me externally as like a misfortune or like being anxious or angry about things happening. I started really thinking about every opportunity as an experience to learn and to grow. And like, what is this trying to teach me? Like, what am I being asked to learn in this moment right now?
Well said, man. That's how it was for me too. I don't want to assert that all of it's true. And again, I'm still very skeptical about a lot of the Law of One.
How could you not be?
Right, man. I mean, the claims are so wild, especially like the nature that how the book came out in the first place. Like,
Yeah.
like it's a group of people who's involved in channeling, and there's a lot of speculation around the CIA being involved with infiltrating and being the impetus for people to even get into channel material. Then even if it is legitimate channeling, there's a question on like what they might be channeling. All that is relevant. And all I can say is that the concepts and the Law of One was like me having something that I've always kind of thought that has lingered in the back of my mind finally articulated to me in the form of a book.
I feel like I have said those exact same words like in reference to it. Like it felt more like remembering something was true than like learning something I hadn't previously. And so that's all I'll say about it is it just resonated with me and like just the concepts, like not even like the physical claims that it makes about like, events in history that have happened. That stuff's all like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like the philosophical ideas that were presented of like how we are here to love and here to learn and here to grow, and that life itself is benevolent and like trying to teach us these lessons, and really just that like this one life that we are living like serves a greater purpose, and it's like it's not all that there is. I feel like it really helped me like expand my perspective and like get out of like my own life and like my own problems and think more from like a bigger picture perspective, like a cosmological, like how am I affecting like the planet and like what is life really about? Like why am I really here? And I think the answer is like to grow and to learn and to love and to help other people as much as I possibly can.
Amen, man. I mean, the thing is, even if let's say the entirety of the law of one is completely fake. All I know is that it has had a tremendously positive impact on my life and the way I view the nature of this experience and my relationship to the natural world and to the people around me. Like, by far has had a tremendous impact on my life. And one of the concepts that the law of one presents, I guess really two concepts that it presents that have deeply impacted me as it pertains to even what's gone on over the last 6 years with the whole COVID charade and figures like Klaus Schwab and Anthony Fauci, which people have a lot of thoughts about and a lot of people view as negative beings that have done a lot of harm in this realm, right? Is the concept of polarizing service to self or service to other. And even those that polarize service to self, meaning that they're very self-interested people who are trying to exploit other people for their own selfish gain. That's the direction that they polarize. The actions that they commit, the things that they do in reality are offered up as catalysts, which is the second concept for us to then basically, for lack of a better term, look at it and transmute that situation and bring about more love in response.
Yeah, I love that concept. I think that was also one of like that was one of the concepts that I feel like is like really opens your eyes like to like the world around you. The idea that like every situation is divided into one of two categories. It's either positive or negative, like service to others, service to self. It happens with hierarchies, it happens with people, it happens within relationships, it happens within, each and every conversation. That was a pattern that I was like, that just presented itself as like objectively true to me, like, and just observing it in my everyday life, like I was like really seeing it everywhere.
Yeah, and it kind of correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a few years since I've read the Law of One. It kind of puts it on a spectrum, right? Because there's like service to self over here, and then it's a spectrum leading to service to other, right? Yeah, because I remember that in order to polarize towards service to other, the percentages that Ra puts forth are you have to be 51% oriented towards service to other people and 49% oriented towards service to yourself at the least in order to polarize in that direction, which implies like balance. Like it implies that you can't really effectively serve other people well unless you love yourself and also serve yourself and nourish yourself.
Yeah, I think it was saying that like the minimum requirement to truly be like fully polarized service to others is like, I think there's like 51%, because that basically implies like you're thinking of others more than you think of yourself.
Yep.
Which really, like when like you think about it, or like when you like analyze yourself in the way that people act, that's very hard. It's truly difficult to like put others before yourself the majority of the time. And so it's like, it's a lofty goal. It's a very worthy aspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, going back to like the Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates thing, the Anthony Fauci, COVID era stuff, the Law of One is what really allowed me to look at that with less
like anger.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like, of course, a lot of the acts that were committed, a lot of the things that were done during that era were morally reprehensible, were wicked. Like you could call them that. You could put that label on them. And at the same time, I know that on the back end of that, my life has gotten tremendously better since COVID. I've become more loving. I've become more in touch with who I truly am. My relationships have gotten better. I could name a variety of things that have gotten tremendously better as a result of seeing that as a catalyst. Another way to say that is seeing that as an offer, and you can respond to that offer in a variety of ways. Yeah,
I love that concept as well. I think it's like, for me, that is kind of like the answer to the question that like, atheistic people always ask, like, how could God like allow evil to be in a world? And I think that the answer is like, you can choose to respond to it like with love, and that it's actually progressing evolution, progressing growth, like much, much faster. It's like pouring fire on that process, because it's like the strength that it takes to like be met with like true evil, or like someone to truly like wrong you. Or like, it's like Jesus, like to truly like forgive your enemy. Like obviously like Jesus, like the most amazing example of this, like forgiving his enemies, like on the cross in the most dire of circumstances, like the strength that it takes to do that. And like the power of that is like so much higher than, just showing love to like someone that you do love. Right. And, Jesus even says that he's like, everyone, like even bad people love their friends, but the strength that it takes and like the power that it holds to like truly forgive your enemies and meet that with love is like, exponential. It's unimaginable. And that's like what I was getting at the beginning of the podcast with the Epstein video, because it's like to see these atrocities and this evils and to still say like, I'm going to react with love and like fight even harder for the light and not like give into like anger or hatred is like unbelievably powerful. It's like the biggest impact that we can have on this world is to meet, what is dark and what is wrong with love.
Quick shout out to Prodigy, the team that we brought on to produce our podcast. We started working with them last year and the difference was immediate. Way less stress on the back end for us with podcast production, and our YouTube has grown significantly since bringing on Prodigy. If you're already running a podcast and looking to boost your production value, or if you're thinking about starting a podcast, I highly recommend working with Prodigy. If you check the show notes, there's an assessment that Prodigy has put together to give you specific steps to take to grow your own podcast. And that's whether you're just getting started or looking to take your current podcast to the next level. Each month, they're giving away a strategy call with their founder, Justin Moore, and he is incredibly talented and incredibly smart, and he really knows how to grow a podcast from the ground up. So if you're interested in working with Prodigy, just head to the show notes and take the assessment. And if you decide to work with them, just mention AlexZek in the way forward, and they'll give you a nice little deal. I think that's such an important message now too, especially coming from someone who's a part of the younger generation, because there are so many people who are buying into the idea that we need to quote unquote fight back against the system, that we need to fight back. And even some people in my comments, because I made a post yesterday that was basically getting at, okay, yep, Thomas Massey lost the primary. Now people are like adopting this very defeatist mentality related to that. And I've basically chalked up the entire political landscape to like, I'm not like, it's nonsensical. That's not going to achieve any long-term.
I just quit trying with politics.
Yeah, man. But
I just can't spend enough. Here's my take on politics is like, I would have to do so much like research and like put so much time into like understanding everything that's happening like economically and politically and like looking at all the opinions to actually like get to a place where I would feel even comfortable giving a take, like I understood everything going on enough to like say what I thought was going on. And I'm just not willing to do that. Like I have too many other things to worry about. And I just stay out of it.
That's fair. And for someone who's done, I would say a significant amount of research on that, much more in the past than I did now, especially because I was West Point graduate, former U.S. Army officer. Like I've done a significant amount of research on that. I've come to the conclusion that it's all nonsensical and no long-term positive effects will come from that system anyway. So let's stop feeding it and outsourcing our authority to it and abdicating self-responsibility to it. That's been my take. And so with the whole Thomas Massey situation that occurred yesterday of him losing the primary, I looked at that as just another act of, similar to the Epstein files, like there's a lot of details surrounding this that I'm not going to get into right now, but essentially that this was another way to demoralize freedom-oriented people and get them to think that there is no hope, that there's no one fighting for them, blah, 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 blah. But the deeper layer to that is like, why do we need to buy into this belief that we need someone in there fighting for us in order for us to have a better, more peaceful, fruitful, healthy life? Like that itself is a psyop. And I say that to say because there's people in my comments saying, nope, I disagree with you. It's time. The gloves are coming off. We need to fight back with violence. I'm like, no, that will just breed more of the same stuff. In order to quote unquote win, as if this is a game, and it's not a game, it's life that we're playing right now. And I guess you could look at it that way. We need to express more love and express more of who we truly are and reclaim our own authority and understand that God is the only true authority in this realm.
Yeah, because I think it really comes down like to like a spiritual, like metaphysical standpoint of like, I don't know, like you maybe even like hypothetically, like a quantifiable amount of like darkness that's like stored up in the world, and like each little bit of that darkness that is met with love like gets like dissolved, right? And so it's like every time you're meeting that darkness with more darkness, you're just like, you're not actually doing anything. Like you're changing the physical circumstances, but you're not addressing like the underlying like darkness that's stored, like maybe from like a Jungian perspective that is like contained within the collective unconsciousness of humanity, So it's like really, it's hard for our physical brains to kind of like think about this, because we always think like, okay, what's actually happening physically is like actually what matters. But I think it's probably deeper than that, is that the real impact we can have on this world is like how much love we are like injecting into like humanity itself, into the collective unconsciousness. And I think like if you're religious or if you like spiritual tradition, like this is truly what every spiritual tradition ever like has said. It's never been about like, you need to change the political system, you need to go become a king, and enact physical change. It's always just spread love, forgive your enemy, be the greatest person you can be, like treat others with compassion, want the best for everybody. And that is like, the path to God, the path to like the kingdom of heaven. Even.
Amen. Can modern science measure love at this point?
Not that I know of.
See, that's my point though. And like that is the primary driver. There's a reason why the term is win over the hearts and minds. Like you share these narratives to win the hearts and minds of people, which is pointing to something that is fundamentally metaphysical and not measurable. You can't quantify love. You can't isolate love. You can't measure love. But that is the primary driver, one of many primary drivers, those intangible things that lead to actual behaviors, actual physical actions in reality, which suggests what I was going back to the beginning, that Walter Russell quote is that in general, it's the metaphysical things that are driving the physical happenings of this realm. You see what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I agree. I think that consciousness, like mind, is fundamental and that matter is secondary. I mean, so it's like scientifically, if we understand like the complete happenings of matter, like there's a thought experiment with like a devil. I forgot what the name of it is, but like a devil, it's like hypothetically, if a devil knew every single position of every atom in the entire universe, you could like predict the future, like forwards and backwards. I don't think that's true, but then it's like, even if that, like, that's like the peak of, material reductionism, of like the peak of like scientific achievement would be that. The question is like, so what? Like the thing that actually matters, and the thing that all science is actually like trying to achieve is the improvement of conscious experience. Like your life, like this experience that each and every one of us is having, like, how can we make that the best? And the thing that everybody like wants in their life, is joy and happiness and love and peace. Like those are the things that objectively, like by definition, everybody wants in their life. And so those are the things that we should like try to have. Like this should be like our focus. We just get distracted on arbitrary things really, instead of focusing on like what is like the fundamental like thing that this people's desires or achieve. I'm getting mixed up.
I get what you mean.
People get distracted in pursuing things that represent these feelings, but aren't the things themselves. And so you're looking for a job or a position, or you're trying to find this, maybe publish a scientific paper or whatever thing represents the feeling of, fulfillment or accomplishment or peace or love. But that thing is like fundamental within yourself, and you can tap into it without doing anything externally and express that and bring more of it not only into your own life, but into the entire world and the people's lives around you.
I hoped as you were saying all this that that's where you were heading, because that's exactly what I was thinking about. Even when it comes back to, and I don't want to keep going back to this, it's just an example. It's a relational example with this Thomas Massey situation. So many people are like, well, what do you suggest we do? And the whole point that I was trying to get at in the post is that like these things you're talking about, cultivating joy, peace, love, whatever quote unquote positive feeling that someone is chasing, right? The presupposition when people are asking this question of me, like, what are we supposed to do? Is that in order to make reality better for them, there are physical actions that they need to take. Now, that might be true to some degree, but the primary thing that needs to change, which will actually lead to more authentic physical reactions, better physical actions and better things related to what's happening in the physical realm, is your internal state. That has to change first. It's an inverse on what most people think, that we need to do X, Y, and Z physical actions in order to feel this way. It's the opposite. We need to feel this way and cultivate this authentic feeling inside of us. Then the physical world and our actions in relationship to it will begin to reflect that. It's the opposite.
Bingo. Yeah, I completely agree. And that's been my personal experience, is that like my greatest like accomplishments and the things that I've like been able to do like so far have come like as a result of like the internal, like the ways I've internally shifted and like the progress that I've made like within my own heart, and like my Instagram account and like my experience in school and just like my relationships with the people around me in my life have all come from me like naturally as like an expression of who I am on the inside and like my own internal like love and joy, rather than like me trying to do those things so that I can feel happy. Those things have flown from me as a result of me like already being like internally like peaceful and like feeling aligned within.
Amen, man. Amen. And it's so hard when there is so much chaos and turmoil in reality and so much division and despair occurring amongst the collective right now, to even for those who know, to pull yourself out of that mindset. It's like we really are individually the vectors for change. It all comes back to the individuated rather than individual self and what we can cultivate inside of us and then express outward in order to help the world become more harmonized, in order to help the world come back into a balanced state.
Yeah. And the most beautiful thing for me personally has been like the way in which I've been able to see it like impact like the people in my immediate life. And that like in the past, especially when I was first getting into like, nutrition and health, but like I hadn't gotten like the spiritual stuff yet or like that kind of thing. Or like maybe I was just getting the spiritual stuff and I was like preaching about it and wanted to tell everybody about it. And like, you need to do this, you should be doing this. Blah, blah. So I was in that state. Like I knew all the health stuff. I knew the nutrition stuff. I probably even knew some of the spiritual ideas. Like you need to be doing this. Like you're doing this wrong. Like if you change this, you'll be happier, right? But it was coming from a place of like, I hadn't embodied that yet. And so I was just that guy. I was just that annoying guy. I definitely did this in my fraternity.
For real?
Totally.
How did your frat brothers take you at that time?
I mean, I think it was still fine, but I definitely just took every opportunity I could to talk about like nutrition or like spirituality or bring up Christianity or talk about whatever and like kind of like try to preach to people, and nobody likes that guy. But like once I had like embodied those things myself and like I stopped trying to like, convince people or like try to change everything in my life, the people in my life that like I wanted to change, especially like my family members, like my personal family members and like, close friends, like started like coming to me and like asking me for help or advice or like just doing the things like as a result of like seeing how they made me feel. So instead of like, now I'm like saying you need to eat this because it's going to make you feel better and you need to exercise, like I'm just like doing these things myself and I'm like happy and embodied and they see me thriving. And so they're like inspired to do it themselves instead of me just coming and preaching them. And that's really just like made my heart feel so good that I'm able to like indirectly like help the people in my life. I love that. And that's been the most like touching thing to me.
It's being the example.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally being the example. And
it's what I wanted. It's what I wanted to happen like beforehand, but it couldn't because I wasn't living it yet.
Yeah, I know that like there's an example that I always use where there's the person who is living in the most un-Christ-like way that is trying to jam the Bible down people's throats and telling them they're going to go to hell if they don't profess Jesus as their Lord and Savior, which is like the biggest turnoff ever. Maybe they'll convert some people to Christianity through fear, but that's never a good thing that you're weaponizing fear in order to get someone to adopt a different belief system and things like this. Versus the flip side of that, the people who are quietly just living like Christ as best as they possibly can, to where people become curious and are like, what's different about that guy?
Mm-hmm.
Like that guy is different than most of the other people that I come across. I want to learn more about what he does because he seems to have something figured out that I don't have figured out yet.
Yeah, it's evidence that you actually have what you say you do.
Amen. Exactly. That's awesome, man. You're only 20 years old and you're already doing that. That's good.
Woo.
That's good. Okay, we'll have to have you back on when you're in midway through medical school because like I said, the people I've interviewed have already gone through medical school. I would just be interested to know what medical school is like now. So we'll revisit that at some point. But I know you wanted to talk about how do you pronounce it? Soltopia? Soltopia. Okay, let's hear about this a little bit.
Yeah, that's actually like, part of my whole story. Like getting into content. Like I did the content coaching program and Netta was actually in that program with me. I ended up going on a retreat to Costa Rica with her. And she's the woman who also felt her grandpa right beside her at the same time that I did. And so now she's like one of my closest friends. And back in May, I went to like an event for her new company that she's starting called Soltopia. And it's basically like a heart-centered, like soul-based social media platform that instead of trying to like exploit people for their attention and like kind of take advantage of them, is really just built with them in mind. You know, like it's made for all ages, and it's just trying to be like the best place like for humans. I think that the name means like soul, it's SOL, like sun, topia, like community, and H at the end is like for humans. So it's like a community of light built with humans in mind.
That's cool. Can you tell me a little bit more about the platform?
Yeah. So right now it's not fully released yet. I think people can sign up for early release, or it's like to be on the wait list for it. But it's going to be like hand selected creators and content. All of it's like moderated, and so it's made sure it's supposed to be like an all-in-one place for creators, like for their communities to interact, so they can have like all their modules, all their videos, all their offerings all in one place, and it's curated specifically to be like child friendly and just like wholesome for all ages, and to like try to maximize human experience and maximize like your power and free will instead of like usurping them from you, like stealing them.
I like that. That's cool. We need more platforms like that popping up all over the place. I think
and so good. I think that would be really cool in the future. I'm really excited to be a part of that in the future and see how all that goes.
Cool, man. Is there anything else you want to talk about or share?
Was there anything else that we had?
I don't think so. Yeah, because we talked about like the neti principle. On my end, I don't think there's anything else really.
I might be interested to talk about like where you see like the future going, especially in terms of like.
So you're interviewing me now. Okay.
I'd love to talk about like the future, like where you see everything going in the future, especially with like technology. I'm really interested in like advances in medical technology and like potential like longevity, and just like where do you see like the perfect like kind of human society, like if everything goes well, like in the future, what do you see that being? And especially now, oh my God, like they're starting to talk about like aliens and like disclosure, and they just recently started mentioning like the 4 species. I'm like, oh my God, I've been talking about the same 4 species of aliens for years now. Like, this is insane.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that, man. A lot of thoughts. So I'll answer that one because it's more top of mind. I remember back in like 2012 when I was a freshman at West Point. We call it plebe. We don't call it freshman. Instead of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior at West Point, we have plebe, yearling, cow, firstie. It's just a military academy thing. But when I was a freshman at West Point, back then, before I was awake to any of the stuff that I'm awake to now, I was obsessed with the prospects of extraterrestrial life, UFO phenomena, and other things of that nature, alien life on other planets, et cetera, et cetera. And man, I was seen as absolutely batshit crazy by a lot of my close friends when I would get into these topics, and I would show them some Stephen Greer videos, Disclosure Project, some Bob Lazar videos, some supposed evidence of UFOs and like amateur videos that had been shot and things like this. And
this is me and my fraternity.
Yeah, okay. And it's interesting because coming full circle, and this is part of my skepticism with the law of one, and this is a whole separate conversation. I don't know where I fully stand on aliens and extraterrestrial life from other planets at this point. I would say that it's pure speculation. Now, do I think that there are beings that are non-human-like that have higher intelligence that exist in this realm in some capacity? Absolutely. Do I think that there are advanced non-physical beings that exist all around us at all times, some benevolent, some malevolent? Absolutely, I do. Do I think that there is advanced technology that exists that us human beings have not had access to? Absolutely, I do. Now, whether that technology is created by government or by these other beings, I don't know. It could be somewhere in between. I just do not, I'll just put it this way. For a variety of reasons, and that we could devote a whole episode to. Maybe I should interview someone on this because I know there's a few people that have asked me to interview a variety of people on this. For a variety of reasons, I'm skeptical of the government sharing and quote unquote disclosing anything related to extraterrestrials, UFOs, and aliens and things like this. And I don't know that I believe they're telling us the truth on it. And that is partially all acknowledged coming from the perspective that I am very skeptical of anything that the government says. And at the same time, over the course of time, since I initially read The Law of One and had explored a lot of this stuff when I was younger, I have adopted more nuanced takes on the nature of this realm, the possibility of extraterrestrials, what's going on outside of this realm that we're currently in, being this Earth realm. And I just don't know where I stand on all of it. And I just find it is interesting timing. And I'm just very skeptical of a lot of it, if that makes sense. Yeah,
I would agree. You know, obviously it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to take like a positive stance on that, like say I know anything that's going on, but it's just been, it's so,
it's fascinating.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah,
it's been
fascinating.
Something that's just like been a hobby, like super fun to just look into and research. Right. And like, so for the future, I'm just excited to see where it goes, honestly.
Same. I totally agree. And I will say this, in either case, wherever I land on this, and again, I'm in the I don't know phase, and like I'm open to all perspectives on it phase, if that makes sense. If you had told me 5 years ago, if you had told me even 4 years ago, 3 years ago, probably, that Fox News would have one of their lead anchors talking about the different alien races that exist openly,
unbelievable,
in a non-skeptical way, like he's like almost asserting that this is a truism, right? I would have never imagined that would occur. Like, that is wild to me. And then also, society is just so distracted with so many things. It seems to be the general sentiments of most people are just like, oh, okay.
So yeah, it's just another thing. It's added to the pile.
Right. Like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Yeah. It's wild that we're to that point, that so many of these previously fringe conversations are now being brought into the mainstream, that is just another thing that's just like, okay.
Yeah. And whether it be like aliens or like AI or quantum computing or robotics, like, or like medical advancements, like I am extremely excited for the future. And like, even just like in the next year or 2 years, like the world's just going to keep continuing to change like such an incredibly like fast rate. It's going to be so hard to keep up with. Like, I'm just here for it. Like, I am so excited. I would not want to have been born at like any other time, because this is like just unbelievably like fascinating and like stimulating to me, just like how much of a transition we are in humanity. And so it's like, it's why I really want to like try to be like a positive force and like, you know, voice for like steering us in the right direction, because we're obviously like a huge inflection point where, you know, things could go kind of either way, you know, who's to say, right? And technology is only going to like increase the leverage of like the gravity of each decision like to be made, right?
Totally agree.
But I'm just here for it. I'm excited. I'm optimistic about the future, and I think that lots of times like things are better than people think, and especially like right now with like all this darkness that's been like festering in humanity for the last like, you know, especially decades within like the US, but just as a whole, like thousands of years, like in the collective unconscious of humanity. I think that lots of that is like right now coming up to kind of like be seen. And so I'm of the opinion that like maybe generally things like seem to be a lot worse than they are at the moment. But overall, I'm just hugely optimistic and excited for the future and excited for all the possibilities. Like, I want to go to space.
Healing is hard, man. Like, when you're in the middle of the healing phase, the symptoms that you're experiencing can be incredibly challenging. But if you realize that symptoms themselves are just your body doing exactly what it was designed to do, to come to healing, to come back to homeostasis, to come back to coherence. Likewise, when it comes to the collective, we're experiencing the symptoms of things that needed to be uprooted and out of society in the first place, like that we needed to heal collectively. So we're in the healing phase right now, and that is incredibly challenging.
Fever's running hot.
The fever's freaking hot right now. Exactly. So I agree with you, man. I'm optimistic about the future. And if we can sort of look at these technological advancements, and I'm sure that in many ways, I mean, I know for sure that in many ways they're being co-opted, and they will be attempted to be used to exploit us, to cause harm. On the flip side of that, if we can align with technology and ensure that we're coming from the perspective of trying to make it harmonious with nature, with ourselves, and we're coming from the perspective of wanting to create something that is better for us, we can use technology in a very conscious way. So in that respect, I am very excited. In either case, we're living in a pretty wild time right now, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, it's super wild. It's like, it's overwhelming. It is like undeniably overwhelming. And so it's why I think like right now more than ever, it's like even more important to like remember what we said, that like no matter how disorienting and crazy things like seem externally, like really like what matters, like at the end of the day, is internally. And like, that's where your world like really resides. It's like how you choose to present yourself internally, like to the external world, no matter how crazy things get.
Amen, man. Amen. Brandon, I love that there are people like you that are as young as you are, that are doing the work that you're doing and have the mindset and the heart state that you have. Thank you so much for being here, man. And when you are in medical school, we'll get you back on.
I would love to.
I'm really interested to talk to you about that. So
yeah, I'm curious to see how it all goes. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome, man.